easy, either or, doesn't matter.
This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg, here in South Africa. My name is Eben Anthony. The show is always live, broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, between 9 and 12 every weekday morning, you can watch us on our live streaming facility on YouTube. On that same channel, you can also watch us back later on demand at any time of the day. Today we ask you the question of the day. COP21 starts the conference of the parties. Is there the global political will to deal with climate change? That's what we would like you to tell us or give us your thoughts on today. Most of our show is dedicated to climate change and the COP21 conference. On that note, let's go to Elvis President for a news update.
In your headlines, world leaders will launch an ambitious attempt to tackle global warming at COP21. The R28 between Western Area and Vereniging in Gauteng was reopened late yesterday following a horrific crash that claimed 19 lives. And Pope Francis will end his three-nation African tour today with a visit to a mosque in the capital of the Central African Republic. Those are all your headlines, but first, before we get into the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much, and a very hearty good morning to you at home as well. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. So close, yet so far for Orlando Pirates as they lose 1-0 to a highly organized Etoile du Sahel in Tunisia.
It's Charles Schwartzel again.
Charles Schwartzel wins the Alfred Dunhill at Leopard Creek, becoming the first South African to win the same European Tour tournament 4 times.
Nico Rosberg comes out of the last corner in Abu Dhabi to take victory here in Abu Dhabi, his 6th win.
Nico Rosberg closes off the season with a hat-trick of wins as Mercedes powers into a record 12th 1-2 finish of the year.
Donut for Nico Rosberg.
That in a nutshell is what we've got for you in the sports. Make sure you stick around for that, 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this hour. World leaders will launch an ambitious attempt today to tackle global warming at COP21. They have arrived at the United Nations climate change talks in Paris for 2 weeks of tough talking. The gathering follows the failure of a previous summit in Copenhagen 6 years ago. Since then, pressure to tackle the causes of rising temperatures has risen. Many scientists say failure to agree on strong measures in Paris will doom the world to ever hotter average temperatures. And we'll give you an update on that story as it unfolds over there, as well as in-depth discussions around climate change this morning, so you have to stay tuned. Now, Pope Francis will end his three-nation African tour today with a visit to a mosque in the capital of the Central African Republic in Bangui. The country is split along religious lines, and thousands of people have been killed in 3 years of clashes between Christians and Muslims. On his arrival in Bangui yesterday, the Pope was protected by the heaviest security seen on his trip so far, as thousands of French and UN troops patrolled the city. France, which has around 900 soldiers deployed in the country, warned the Vatican this month that the visit could be risky. But the Pope was determined to go to the CAR, where the majority of the population is Christian. Bangui is the final leg of his first African trip, which has already taken him to Kenya and Uganda. Back home, the R28 between Western Area and Vereniging in Gauteng was reopened late yesterday following a horrific crash that claimed 19 lives. 8 women, 6 men and 5 young boys lost their lives when a taxi collided with a truck before bursting into flames. It's not clear where the taxi was coming from, but police believe it was going to Carltonville. 5 people were taken to hospital. Now, those are some of your stories coming up in a short while. We have some more news and interviews and analysis with Eben Janssen just after the break.
At Philips, we wake up every morning and ask, how can innovation make a difference to you? How can thousands of LEDs bring the pyramids to life and light up hearts? How can an air fryer make delicious traditional meals with up to 80% less fat? How can portable ultrasound be part of a program to help lower infant mortality in Uganda? Because the only innovation that really matters is innovation that matters to you. Innovation and you. Philips.
Bond, it's Moneypenny. I've got your phone. Will you do me a favour next time? Go and pick it up yourself.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom here on SABC News. And now, of course, our focus today is on what's happening at COP21. We're asking you the question at home. Our question of the day deals with what happens at the climate change discussions conference. Is there the global political will to deal with climate change? That's what we want to know from you. You can send us your contribution at SABC Newsroom. Now in South Africa, fracking is one of the issues that are climate change issues that have been under the spotlight now. AfriForum and the Treasure the Karoo Action Group, the TKAG, have submitted documentation at the North Gauteng High Court challenging the regulations with regards to petroleum exploration and production here. The regulations were promulgated on the 3rd of June 2015 and are widely known as the regulations on fracking. Now, the CEO of the TKAG, Jonathan Dale, he joins us from our studios in Sea Point in Cape Town. A very good morning to you, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us.
Morning to you. Great to be on your show.
Just tell us quickly what's the latest with regards to the court case.
I think at the outset I would like to make a point with your viewers that I'm not somebody that is anti-development, but rather pro-sustainability. And that has really brought us to a point where we have had no option other than to challenge these regulations formally in the High Court. We've tried for months and years to have a dialogue with the Department of Minerals, with various other official stakeholders, to no avail. And essentially, South Africa is on the cusp of letting loose a technology like fracking, which is a water-thirsty technology and one that has the potential to pollute a lot of our underground water supplies at a time when South Africa is in a tipping point with water. And it's really in the interest of the public that we bring this action.
Tell me about the action. Where are you with the action?
Well, we've just launched it. We had 180 days in terms of law to bring this action against the regulations. They were promulgated on June the 3rd this year. And so during the day today, we will be notified by the High Court of a court date, and the process will then start rolling. It's going to be quite a long and protracted court case because it's a very technical issue, and there will be a lot of evidence led, I should imagine, from both sides. The important thing here is that while this case is going on, we believe that there's a strong chance that any exploration licenses issued for fracking would also have to be set aside pending the resolution on these regulations.
You mentioned earlier when you started, you said you're not anti-development, you're pro-sustainability. Just explain to me, within that context, what do you mean?
What that means for the man in the street, for the people that are watching this program, is when we talk about sustainability, I'm talking about the very basic issues, food and water security in this country, as opposed to bringing in another new and unnecessary fossil fuel that could only start developing some type of benefit for this country in 10 to 15 years. In the meantime, it exposes our country and our environment to enormous risk. It risks sustainable jobs in agriculture, sustainable jobs in tourism, which is a very strongly growing sector in South Africa. And we cannot see the need to actually fiddle with that recipe on the basis of getting another fossil fuel, right? Also, at the same time, where the whole world is talking about divesting from fossil fuel use and moving towards renewables. It just doesn't make sense.
Neither of it is going to be an overnight process. I want to talk to you within the realm of development. South Africa, we face 25% unemployment. It seems to be not getting any better. The outlook of the economy is not really good. How do you find the balance between development and sustainability? And do you have any ideas around that?
It's a very difficult economic question, but you will hear from economists, particularly the ones that have a more corporate viewpoint, and we call it blue sky thinking, that the way for governments and countries to get themselves out of trouble is through growth. And that implies that there is exponential growth that can take place. We are already on a planet that is also a tipping point in terms of the resources that it has available to fuel such growth. Basically, people have got to start living more carefully. They've got to change their lifestyles completely. There are vast percentages of the population that are living at poverty levels and below. And essentially, the top levels of society need to start changing their lifestyles. They need to start consuming less. And even in terms of things like job allocation and access to jobs, people might have to take a step backwards. They might have to work eventually half a month so that somebody else can get a job half a month. So the concept is prosperity without growth, because we're reaching the limits of the growth, and we need to work differently with the resources that we have on Earth.
The planet doesn't grow by 5% every year. That's one thing that economists don't seem to understand. But fracking has the potential to add 2-3 points even onto our GDP every year if that happens. How do you convince the public that we shouldn't go that route if you have this fruit that's hanging there that could change the game for our economy?
I've been leading this campaign for 5 years, since 2011. And the news, especially the economic news around the world in places like America, is not good. The oil industry did a very, very good marketing job of marketing shale gas around the world, just like the cigarette industry does with tobacco. And the truth is coming out in that it is not the economic low-hanging fruit that it's supposed to be. Big companies are facing bankruptcy in America. The bottom has fallen out of the shale gas market, and it was so even before the Saudis started manipulating the oil price. So the economics of shale gas, for instance, don't come anywhere close to matching what this country could do if it put its heart and mind and soul behind renewable energy.
You talk about renewable energy. What are those alternatives, if one can call it that, that you as the TKG are looking at and want to put forward?
We would like to see, South Africa has got, I think, after Brazil, the second best solar irradiation in the world. So the potential for energy from solar in this country is vast. Battery storage capabilities are marching forward technologically. It's getting better all the time. Solar power stations in Spain have repeatedly now generated electricity 24 hours a day, right through the darkness as well. So that technology is changing dramatically. And something that we are seeing, and it's documented, is that rand for rand, kilowatt hour for kilowatt hour, the cost of renewable energy is going down. It's probably quite close to grid parity. In other words, around about the same price as fossil-fueled energy. It's going down all the time. But importantly, solar or renewable energy also creates more sustainable jobs than the fossil fuel industry will ever be able to do.
Jonathan, thank you very much for that contribution this morning. That is the CEO of the Treasure the Karoo Action Group, Jonathan Deal, coming to you live from Cape Town, of course. He was talking about why fracking should not happen here in South Africa. We'll continue that discussion. We'll talk to the CSIR. They're not here yet. We'll speak to them as soon as they come in. Also, we've got the United Nations lined up in our Pretoria studio. Hopefully we'll cross there shortly to get their view on what should happen at COP21 and, of course, what should happen with South Africa's energy needs. Anyhow, hundreds of thousands of people marched worldwide to demand action to stop climate change. Yesterday, just before the UN summit in Paris, of course, COP21, that starts today, rallies were held in London and Paris, and others are planned in New York, Rio de Janeiro, and Mexico City. Activists want action to limit the rise in the average global temperature by 2 degrees to pre-industrial revolution levels. Activists were banned from marching in Paris, following, of course, the Islamic State attacks in the city earlier this month, but they laid out more than 20,000 shoes to symbolize absent marches. There's been lots of action around it, or lots of traction around this on social media. Yeah, some of those tweets. Tom talks about, are they singing Earth Song in solidarity with the climate change march? Either way, it's a pretty phenom. Then Fasai says, numbers smaller than expected at Dublin climate change march due to the bad weather. There you have a picture of the shoes. 20,000 pairs of shoes were put out because they couldn't march in Paris because of security concerns. Of course, Scott Sparks says, man, the Parisians know how to be poetic no matter what. Shoes in lieu of the climate march when the rally was disallowed. Yes, it certainly makes a big statement. If we melt the North Pole, where will Santa live? Hashtag homeless Santa. Of course, we're dealing with climate cheap. Homeless Santa, that is, of course, that was our final tweet. Now, let's take a look at our picture of the day. Now, it's a very interesting one this is. Look at that picture. Snow in Cairo for the first time in 112 years. When you think Cairo, you think heat and you think sand. That is snow in Cairo for the first time in 112 years. Now, if that picture does not convince you that climate change is real, nothing else will. Snow in Cairo for the first time in 112 years. There were pictures on the Giza Plateau of snow lying about almost half a meter thick, some say a foot. But it's semantics. The Sphinx covered in snow for the first time in 112 years. Now, let's just take a quick look at the front pages from around the globe. We start in Europe, where the Times reports that Turkey's 75 million citizens will be given the right to travel to and within Europe without a visa next year, after European Union leaders took a gamble yesterday that the country could solve the continent's migration crisis. Then, International New York Times says Paris police fired tear gas at demonstrators, pelting them with bottles in protest at the ban on demonstrations following the 13 November attacks in the French capital yesterday. Of course, climate change marches were in the city. Then the South China Morning Post. The South China Morning Post says there are still big differences barring the way to a global deal to curb greenhouse gases. China's chief climate negotiator said yesterday on the eve of the summit in Paris. Of course, our very own President Jacob Zuma is in Paris already, arrived there yesterday, of course, as the head of COP17. He will also present the credentials of COP17 to the COP21 conference. Now, that one, the 21st United Nations Conference of the Parties, or COP21, which is set to begin in Paris, in France, later today, aims to unite around 150 nations to work out a single agreement on tackling climate change. The idea rather is to reduce global warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius compared to the current 2.5 to 3.75 degrees Celsius. This could be done by, amongst other things, reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and shifting towards cleaner energies such as wind and solar power. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people marched worldwide yesterday to demand action to stop climate change. This happened a day ahead of the UN summit that'll kick off later today. Activists want action at the Paris talks to limit the rise in the average global temperature to what they call pre-industrial levels. Now, in Paris itself, more than 200 demonstrators were arrested after violent clashes there yesterday. And to talk to us a little bit more about COP21, we are now joined by the head of the United Nations Environment Program here in South Africa. Cecilia Njenga is in our Pretoria studios in the capital. Very good morning to you, Cecilia. Is it climate change traffic that had you stumped there this morning?
Yes. Just thinking about crossing over to Johannesburg was a little bit of a nightmare for me this morning. So I chose to stay here in Pretoria, but I think Pretoria is also very well placed as a place where we should be able to speak effectively about the current challenges, the climate change challenge as one that we need to tackle from here, which is the center in the capital city of South Africa. So I think we are really well placed to discuss this issue, even here from Pretoria.
Climate change is real. It's happening all around us. The effects are there for everyone to see. Yeah, in South Africa, we're fighting drought. Actually, the whole of Southern Africa is still waiting for the rains that are now 2 months late. We see snow in Cairo, of all places. COP21, is it for the United Nations? Is it the tipping point? Is this the most important meeting on this topic that we've had, and this is the moment now?
This is indeed a historical opportunity for the world, and we do see the outcome of COP21 has been extremely significant in putting the world back to course in terms of tackling this huge challenge that the world is currently changing. And therefore, for us as the United Nations, we are really looking forward to a very positive outcome. We are looking for an outcome that will give an agreement that will offer safety for the populations, because at the bottom of all this is that it should be an agreement that is beneficial to all communities living wherever they are living throughout the world, that it should be safe, it should be durable, and it should be meaningful. And therefore, we are looking to the world leaders as they gather in Paris this week and next week to come up with this kind of agreement that will be beneficial to all of us.
Now, Cecilia, we ask our viewers today, we asked them a question specifically with regards to this, and you talk about the world leaders meeting. So we ask our viewers, and I would like you to maybe give us an answer to this if you can. We ask, is there the political will to come up with a climate deal this week in Paris? At the UN, do you think there is?
What we have experienced in the last couple of months, there have been a series of meetings this year, is that indeed there is a trend towards a common agreement. There are definitely contentious areas, which I will speak to if you do allow me later on. But we do seem to have some common understanding. The group of 77, together with Africa, seem to be converging to certain levels of agreement. There are indeed aspects between that the developing countries would want to see much more commitment from the developed countries, particularly in the ambitions, as you mentioned earlier. We would like to see a trend towards where the ambition is improved, as you said, before the pre-industrial period. So that, because when the 2-degree ambition, what the African countries are saying is that ambition is not adequate. And it will not see the temperatures reduce to the level of 1.5 degrees. We would like to see an ambition where the developed countries commit to a much more higher ambition of about 3 degrees centigrade. There are also other contentious areas within the balance between mitigation actions versus adaptation. Just to simplify this, mitigation talks to how do we further reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And this is really in line with the industrialized and developed countries, for which, again, South Africa is, as an emerging economy, is tending towards that direction. And that's why we're discussing issues about transitioning to renewable energy, transitioning to much more efficient industrial processes, etc., whether it's in energy, in water efficiency, etc. So there are aspects with regards to mitigation that are very crucial and that are very key. But there is a certain level of not too much pressure being placed on the whole issue of adaptation. And adaptation is the consequences that most of our countries face due to increasing climate change, where due to increases like we are seeing within the Southern Africa region, due to drought, we are seeing our livestock not being able to survive the drought situation, food becoming more expensive as it becomes scarce. We are experiencing water shortages, water scarcity within this region, etc. But also the impact it has on the infrastructure, increased flooding. You know, what does that mean in terms of the capacity of the infrastructure we have? The people living in vulnerable situations, in our informal settlements, in our slums, tend to suffer more when such situations emerge. And therefore, there is a cry from the developing countries that more attention should also be given to the adaptation issues on a 50% parity. So those are some of the contentious issues. And also commitments on financing. You know, how do we track the finances that developed countries are indeed saying they are providing to developing countries to address the current impacts of climate change? Again, there is no clarity in terms of agreeing how do we measure that, how do we monitor that, etc. But indeed, I would say, in a nutshell, we do have a 5-year period between 2015, once we reach a good agreement this next 2 weeks, between 2015 and 2020 to come up with a new legal regime that will guide us going forward. But I would say since the Durban conference that was held here, the COP17, we have seen an increased commitment in terms of coming to an agreeable agreement come this 2 weeks.
President Jacob Zuma is the head of COP17. He will represent those credentials in Paris. The Green Fund was an idea that came out of COP17. Do you think there's still an appetite for this Green Fund that will be able to mitigate climate change around the world? And can we see some movement on it in Paris?
Of course, the debates have been around how much should be allocated to addressing this huge challenge. And how should these finances be channeled? Who should receive this funding? And the current discussion has been to focus more on the least developed countries as the key recipients, as well as the small island development states as the key recipients to this agreement. The Africa group of negotiators is really arguing that Africa also be considered as a key recipient of the funding that would be raised through this process. I think the huge challenge has been the figures and the numbers that we are continuously seeing are not adequate. I mean, the estimates are into trillions and trillions of dollars that would be required to fulfill this challenge. However, the commitments that are coming through do not, in a way, measure up to the huge challenge that we are facing. And therefore, we need to look for more innovative ways of how we are going to raise resources, whether through a domestic process, through our own budgetary processes at country level, or through the private sector, and engaging more the private sector in these discussions and debates, and assisting them to structure their funding to meet, the non-traditional things that banks, commercial banks, normally fund. So those discussions, and the UNEP is leading away with the financial institutions, and we have set up a network through our UNEP FI, the financial institutions, to seek to see how banks can restructure and reinstitutionalize in order for them to address this emerging need.
2 degrees, that's what's the magic number that's floating around in the media, and that will be a discussion point at COP21. Why does 2 degrees matter so much?
Well, the 5th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is really the latest, actually shows that if we go beyond the 2 degrees centigrade, that this will have huge climate change impacts, increased levels of drought, increased levels of flooding, and, patterns that are extreme, climatic variabilities that are so extreme that humans will not be able to cope with it. So that it is, can you imagine a 3 degrees increase here in Pretoria? Already with about 2 degrees, higher levels of temperatures, at times it's quite, unlivable. So if we are to move to a further 2 degrees high level of increase of temperatures, this will have huge impacts, not only on the way we live, but on the way we connect to the environment and expect the environment to provide for us. So it is indeed a grave and crucial and urgent issue that we really need to address. And I really hope that in the next coming years, once we have this agreement, that developed countries will make it their commitment to ensure that we really do keep to the pre-industrial temperature increases that we had before that.
Cecilia, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a very big week for the world, and thank you for sharing how you are thinking at the United Nations about what needs to happen. That's the United Nations head of the environmental program, Cecilia Njenga. She is live in our studios in Pretoria. Yes, the whole week climate change discussions will be underway in Paris and around the world, in the media around the world and elsewhere. Our question to you today, is there the global political will to deal with climate change? That's what we would like for you to give us some input on this issue that is going to affect us, our children, our children's children, everyone and everything that comes behind us will be affected by this issue. We need to change. We need to change the way we think, and we need to change the way we consume. Elvis is standing by with the city of Tshwane, who is affecting some change.
And indeed, the city of Tshwane is affecting that change. The city that is currently doing that, the city of Tshwane, is the first in sub-Saharan Africa to operate a rapid transit bus system that is fully propelled by, listen to this, compressed natural gas. Now, CNG is a renewable energy source that is obtained from various gas fields. Now, for more on the story, we joined in studio by Blessing Manali, the Tshwane municipality spokesperson. Blessing, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning and good morning to the viewers.
Mr. Manali, first and foremostly, why the need for a change to natural gas?
Well, it makes economic sense. It's cheaper, it's cleaner, it's affordable, and it's available in the backyard because it's mainly from waste. It's generated from waste, so that the economics are there. But secondly, it's the environmental impact, as we've been seeing that we are now approaching. We are in Paris for the climate change negotiations, and transport is one of the biggest contributors or emitters. So it makes all kinds of sense.
Was it perhaps coincidence that it was launched in the same week or the week before the COP21?
Well, we included clean energy in part of our bigger plans for the Ariang rapid transit system, but it was not a coincidence. We need to continue to send a message out there that there is commitment, there is political will, and we're actually doing it. And so we had to do it to continue to raise the awareness.
Now, let's go back. You said that you're getting it from waste.
Indeed, yes.
Please explain to me.
Well, basically, compressed natural gas in Tshwane currently, it's being mined or coming out from two sides. One in Bronkhorstspruit in the east of the city, and then in Pretoria North around Roslyn, which is also being used by one of the biggest car manufacturers. So we're actually looking into waste landfill sites and actually picking up the methane gas from underground and actually processing it into fuel, and that's beautiful.
Is there enough of this gas available to propel these buses?
Well, in Tshwane it's not enough, but generally the supply should be able to easily store it in tanks around a few depots in the city. So it's available and we can afford it.
As compared to normal diesel or petrol that people would use, the buses in Tshwane used to use diesel. How different is the compressed natural gas?
40% cheaper, less consumption. So you're already speaking of about almost half of your fuel cost coming low, 25% less carbon dioxide emission, 20% less carbon monoxide emission. So that's a real difference. It's cleaner, it's odorless, it's colorless. So actually it makes you not just only feel healthy, it actually makes you feel better because you can actually feel the impact of the natural.
And in doing so, you're obviously reducing your carbon footprint.
Indeed, this is one of our commitments and our contributions to the national targets for reducing our carbon gas emissions. And the executive mayor of Tshwane is actually one of the champions in sustainable development and climate change mitigation and adaptation. So we're actually leading the pack.
Is there other benefits or spin-offs that the commuters will get and the city will get from using a compressed natural gas?
Well, as I've said, that the reality is that it will be cheaper in fuel, which means that we'll obviously then have to cut the cost of travel. Secondly, because it's compressed natural gas, it's not determined by national, international gas markets. So we're not likely to see price fluctuations each time the oil goes haywire. So those are the immediate benefits. You are sure of the cost of your travel for the next 2 to 3 years.
So the buses are already on the streets of Tshwane?
Yeah, yes, indeed. We've got about 3 or 4 buses in the streets. We're producing 40. Come January, the new year, there'll all be 40 of them in the city of Tshwane when we launch our phase 2 of the Arieng. And the good story is that they're actually being produced in South Africa, in East London. So it's actually also local manufacturing.
That buses, so the buses are actually produced also here. Do you have to change any perspective in terms of the engine or anything like that?
Well, no. You don't have to change that, except that on top of the bus, you've got about 5 cylinders, your typical gas cylinders, and that's the only mechanical change in the bus. Otherwise, the comfort is the same. It has got free Wi-Fi. It moves at the same speed, 350 kilometers without a refuel on gas.
I tell you. Are you going to roll this out to other areas besides Tshwane, or are you talking to other cities like Johannesburg to take this from you?
Well, we've been teaching a lot of cities. I know that the city of Polokwane in Limpopo has actually came in. They were part of the launch because they are now going live with their BRT. Rustenburg is also learning from us. So we expect that at least Rustenburg and Polokwane will come to us and say we've learned from the capital city.
Mr. Manali, thank you so much for your time and good luck with the process.
I'm sure we need more than luck.
That was Blessing Manali, the Tshwane Municipality spokesperson, and that is what you call renewable energy and a change to that. Let's take a break and we'll be right back after this one with Eben.
The road to greatness is not an easy one. It's rough, tough, and full of barriers. And there's only one way to master it. Never, ever stop. Dauntless. The all-new Audi Q7.
In Africa, technology has created many new ways of doing things.
ICT is an increasingly important part of everybody's life.
It's being used in education, for social media, and now for farming too.
The best thing about internet for a farmer is that we get to share information.
On Network, we give you all the important African technology and social media news. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time, only on SABC News.
Welcome back. Now, as COP21 gets underway in Paris today, the focus this week will be on climate change and sustaining our environment. Oil and gas exploration is a hot topic on the African continent right now, especially using the hydraulic fracturing technique known as fracking. There have been numerous debates in South Africa around this, especially about fracking in the Karoo. Now, we've heard the proponents against it earlier, but environmental assessment experts have been tasked by the Department of Environmental Affairs to investigate the impact fracking could have on our environment. Now, joining us in studio today is Professor Bob Scholes, who's an associate with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research here in South Africa, or they're better known as a CSIR. A very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us today.
Morning, Eamon.
The debate has been going on for years in South Africa around fracking. You guys have been busy with the assessments. I want to talk about this firstly before we get into the wider climate change discussion. We heard earlier that, of course, Treasure the Karoo believes that this should not go ahead at all because our water sources places our water sources too much at risk. What does the assessment say?
So the assessment hasn't come to a conclusion yet. It's in its early stages. It is looking very seriously at the water issue. It's one of the one of 17 issues that are being evaluated. In about 9 months' time, we will have a evaluated answer to that question.
In the early discussion, what came out was the balancing act that we have to find between sustainability and development. And South Africa, being a country that is battling high unemployment, somewhat depressed economy and so forth, fracking looks like a low-hanging fruit almost. How do you view that balance between sustainability and development?
Well, clearly that's a balance that every country has to address, and the nature of that balance changes as the country develops as well. What's acceptable under some circumstances might be unacceptable under others, or at a different time. And that's what the assessment does. Is it's not a decision-making process. It evaluates all the information that's available, and there actually are mountains of information.
Yeah.
So much so that the ordinary member of the public just can't see their way through this thicket of data.
Yeah.
So what we do is we organize that and filter it and sort it out so that the decision makers are in a place to understand, if you do this, those are the consequences. If you do that, those are the consequences. If you don't do anything, those are the consequences, and make an intelligent decision.
What's happening internationally? It's been ongoing in America for quite a bit. If you read the mainstream media or the reports coming out of the US, they feel that the economy has become less dependent on oil. They're doing a lot better because they don't have to import so much oil because of fracking, which really looks beneficial. What are they not telling us, or is this the story?
So it's a complex story, actually. There are environmental impacts, and the local communities where the fracking is occurring are certainly quite vociferous about that. There are economic consequences, but we cannot extrapolate simply from the United States experience. One of the main reasons is, clearly their geology is different and their environment is different, but also their social context is different, and so is their oil and gas industry. It's actually much more expensive and more difficult for us to extract shale gas in South Africa than it is in some of the classic plays in North America. And currently, at the present price of oil, the shale gas industry in the United States is taking, a significant strain.
Yeah.
For shale gas to be economically viable in South Africa, even assuming that geologically it's possible, will require a much, much higher oil price than presently is the case.
When we look at what's happening in the world right now, you can't deny that climate change is with us, and it's probably accelerated a little bit faster than I think than we all expected. We see droughts, we see snow in Cairo this morning, for instance, which is almost bordering on the ridiculous. What needs to happen in Paris this week, in your learned opinion, in order for us to get to a place where within the next 5 years we can start to turn this boat around?
Yes, what we have to do in Paris is come to a binding agreement which is also sufficient to keep us away from the serious danger zone. And that means that we can't simply have what we had in the past, which is, a few countries making minor agreements to shave off a few percent here and there, but really nothing happens if they don't agree to that. And our cuts actually have to be very, very soon and quite deep over, the next couple of decades.
We ask our viewers a question today. It's actually our question of the day. It's around COP21. We ask, is there the political will? There it is on the screen. Is there the global political will to really, truly deal with climate change? You within this fraternity constantly, what is your sense?
I think that there is. Obviously that's a statement of faith, and the next 2 weeks will prove whether I'm right or wrong. But we have more will now than we've ever had before. And remember that it's not only amongst politicians. They're the people who ultimately have to sign off on the COP. But we're seeing statements out of the faith community. We're seeing statements out of civil society. We're seeing lots and lots of companies putting up their hands and saying, this is a problem. Let's do something about it.
There seems to be this perceived standoff between the developed world and the developing world. You think there'll be a softening of this divide over the next couple of days, and what needs to happen in order. And even worse, what would happen if that divide does not soften over the next couple of days?
So I think what we're seeing here is kind of classic negotiating tactics. You always sort of have your most strident position in the few minutes before you finally close the deal.
Yeah.
And so that is what we're seeing here, an argument about exactly where that balance will be struck and who pays the costs of doing that. I think that, though, it is quite clear to many in the developing world that unless an agreement is reached now, the downside in terms of the amount of climate change to which they have to adapt starts getting very, very serious. So there is an incentive for them as well to cut a deal, even though the sort of historical fairness would argue that the developed world has to carry a larger part of the burden. But as of now, the global emissions are as much from the developing world as they are from the developed world. The solution is not possible without both sides.
Yeah, historical context also doesn't count, they say. I think
well, I think it does count, but not necessarily that much.
I thank you very much for joining us. Very, very interesting views you share with us today on the issue of climate change, COP21, and fracking. Very much on the radar still here in South Africa. Professor Bob Scholes says that, well, it'll take another 9 months before a final assessment is in on whether we're going to go ahead with fracking in the Karoo here in South Africa. Thank you very much, Professor Scholes. He's an associate, of course, with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research here in South Africa. Let's move on and take a quick look at what's on our Facebook page here this morning. The Road Traffic Management Corporation says it is probing the cause of a crash that claimed 19 lives on the R21 between Gauteng's West Rand and Vereniging yesterday. Then Turkey recovered the body of a Russian pilot from northern Syria and presented it to Russian diplomats yesterday. This is 5 days after shooting down his warplane in an incident that wrecked relations between two of the main powers involved in Syria's war. Finally, distinguished speakers at the official opening of the 7th Afri-City Summit in Sandton here in Johannesburg have emphasized the importance of accountable and transparent leadership in developing African local governments. All of those stories you can find right there on our Facebook page. Going to the search bar on Facebook, put in SABC Newsroom. We pop up, you like our page. You get all the latest stuff, all the latest news, that is. Now, of course, today is an important day. It marks the 21st Conference of the Parties, COP21. That's our theme for the day. We ask you a tough question also. More than 150 world leaders and governments come together for tough negotiations on dealing with climate change. The conference seeks to achieve a legally binding and universal agreement on climate in order to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. There you just saw our question. Now, the man I'm going to ask that question to, or who's going to have the final word today on climate change, of course, is Tsietse. Paul Minari is here in studio, as always, to give us his views on all things to do with the environment. Tsietse?
Yeah.
Before we go into 2 degrees and how the world will look and all that sort of stuff, tell us about the history of the Climate Change Conference. We're at COP21. We still don't have a deal. Are we going to have a deal whether by Friday?
Yeah, that's what we basically all looking forward to, whether this universal agreement, whether it's a deal or not, as long as it's a handshaking agreement, then and everybody agrees to cut their emissions, which is the big, big thing. There's a lot of countries that are still not budging on that one. If you look at the United States, I don't think I'm actually safe mentioning these countries, but the United States and China, even South Africa, of course. We also, as the professor just said, that even the developing world has also led to as much emissions as the developed. So what we basically need is that agreement to actually take place. And it looks like France, it's looking pretty good. The negotiations this last year, there was also a big summit last year in New York where the United Nations Secretary General said, we need to start acting in on this one. And, when it comes from the UN, a lot of people actually start stepping in. And you've seen a lot of celebrities all over the world talking about climate change and all of these marches So, yeah, hopefully the agreement and the deal will be put forward in Paris, and it will be signed by just about all of the countries that are taking part.
I asked Professor Scholes now about the divide between, let's call it the developed world and then the developing world. It always seems as if the interest of individual nations come before the interest of the planet. How are we going to overcome that this week?
It's quite difficult, especially if you look at us in the developing world. Historically, we were not such contributors to global warming and climate change. But now, with our growth and our development, we have actually almost caught up with the developed world. We still do not contribute as much as areas such as the United States, but we're almost catching up. But then also, we've got a lot of other issues to look at, especially when it comes to our economical development. We actually need to pollute for economical development to grow as big as it can get.
In order to feed people, in order to bring down unemployment in South Africa, which is a legitimate threat. Prosperity brings, of course, brings a lot of things, including low crime levels and that sort of thing as well. So how do you find the balance between development and sustainability?
We need to start changing our mindset now and stop thinking about the short term now of being fed now and making money now, and think, what if we can make as much money as we all want to, but now there is no planet to make money on? Then what is the point? So the point now is that we need to start finding strategies of increasing our development capacity, but also doing it in a sustainable way. And that also comes with a lot of education, especially educating our smaller communities and our rural communities, those that do not really affect or understand the impacts that it might have 40 or 60 years from now.
Is it possible to save the planet in a capitalist world? Capitalism demands a growth of between 3 and 5% every year in order for everyone to live well. The planet doesn't grow between 3 and 5% every year. This resource stays the same. It's not infinite.
Yeah, no, certainly not. The way we are living and the way we actually want to be living in the direction we're going to, there's no way we can save the planet that way. We all have to make sacrifices. And that's why the theme of all these COPs coming in from the United Nations is drastic measures, ambitious measures, because they really are ambitious. I mean, that means most of us have to cut all our cars. We have to leave our cars at home and start taking public transport systems, or maybe even cycling to work and using less and less of the resources that we have.
I've got the bicycle and I've got the little carpool, so I'm ahead of the curve. But now I want to show you the picture. There's a picture in Cairo. It's snowing in Cairo. And I want you to give me your view on this, because for the first time it snowed in Cairo in 112 years. How do you see this? As the meteorologist, but also as an expert on the environment, and the man who's fighting for everything green.
Yes.
Do we have the picture? We showed the picture a little bit earlier. There we have that picture. Snow in Cairo for the first time in 112 years.
Yeah.
How do you...
It is a massive change. 112 years is quite a long time. And you can imagine what the conditions of Egypt and northern African regions are like. But we need to get this right. The snow actually happened about 2 years ago. It happened in Cairo, and it was the first time in 112 years, 2 years ago in 2013. And they're going through winter now, and the world is really going through a big change in terms of climate conditions. And you heard what the professor also said, and the big thing is that it is changing. We also need to adapt to all of those changes, which are becoming quite difficult, especially in developing communities. But this one in Cairo, I mean, this just shows, if you look at the example that happened in South Africa, we had heat waves over the western side and then snow in the Eastern Cape, all in 1 month, and all in a small geographical area. It's not even 1,000 kilometers apart. So it is the changes that we are going through, and that's what we all need to start preparing for.
Tietse, time for Tietse to give us a weather update. Well, I'll release you to go and set up. However, the one thing is for sure, we all have to learn to live with less. We all have to learn that. If we don't, the consequences are simply too dire for us to even contemplate. Time now for a weather update, and let's hope he says it's going to rain this week. Tietse Monari is on the weather desk.
Hi there and welcome from the weather desk. So let's have a look at this. Whether there'll be more snow or heat waves over South Africa as well as over the rest of the African continent, we're yet to see. Hot weather is expected though for the western side of South Africa. The South African Weather Service has issued out a warning of really hot conditions there that could lead to a felt fire danger. So please do be extra careful. Possibilities of showers coming in from Namibia, stretching into Botswana and also affecting some parts of South Africa today and possibly tomorrow as well. We're expecting those showers towards KwaZulu-Natal, the central regions of the Northwest Province, some parts of the Free State and also over Gauteng. Temperatures over Gauteng quite hot for Pretoria, 32, maybe even going further up throughout the day. Gaborone is at 35, nice and hot for Lusaka. And we're seeing cooler conditions towards Walvis Bay. Temperatures there dropping to just around 23 degrees. The central parts of Africa where the Pope is at the moment, it is expected to be quite rainy towards the DRC as well as some part of CAR. Do you expect possibilities of thunderstorms? You'll see with the purple shade, there it is. Possibilities of thunderstorms are expected there into some parts of Namibia. Otherwise, we're seeing lesser chance of rain towards the eastern side. Clear conditions for most parts of Mombasa in Kenya as well as over some parts of Tanzania, and you'll see temperatures in Tanzania just around the lower 30s. There's 32 towards Dar es Salaam. Rainy conditions for Nairobi. If you're going to be in Kampala, also expect slightly warmer conditions with possibilities of showers coming in. The central parts are expected to be quite hot as usual. Temperatures into the upper 20s and some of them into the upper 30s. Bangui is going to be just around the 37 degrees. Clear skies are expected for much of the Sahara Desert. A bit of precipitation is expected over Cairo. We did mention there's lots of activity happening there. Look, possibilities of showers for Damascus as well as over some parts of Saudi Arabia. Just looking towards Mecca there is a small chance of rain. And then your temperatures are expected to be quite hot along the central regions and all the way towards the northern parts. And they will go as high as just around the 23 degrees. Do remember, those are wintry conditions towards the northern parts. So you should expect temperatures from 14, maybe even 21s. And it will get cool again for Tripoli as well as over Seba. Hot weather only returning a little bit later on into the afternoon, and the temperatures will go just around 2 or 3 degrees up. So not much of a big change along those parts. So it is going to remain cool with rainy conditions along the west coast and over a place such as Cameroon. You'll see Yaoundé is expected at just around the 23 to even 29 degrees. And that's where I leave it for the weather. Do stay tuned. There'll be more weather here on the SABC News channel.
Health Talk looks into the increase of suicide and symptoms leading to suicide.
The death wish grows when you go into depression after a lot of stress.
And often when we talk about suicide, we don't talk about a person wanting to stop living, but rather wanting to stop living in pain.
After losing everything in life that lead you to no options but suicide.
I had that spirit of fear in me to say, don't even face tomorrow.
After being overwhelmed with stress and trauma, it becomes difficult to have self-control.
People learning tools and skills that will practically enable them to meet these challenges.
In trying times, never be alone. Reach out for help to a better solution.
Support should be done by a counselor or psychologist where you're able to speak about how you're feeling in a safe, accepting, non-judgmental space.
For all your health tips, join Dr. Silo Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10.
It's 10:00 hours Central African time on this Monday, the 30th of November 2015. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. This is Newsroom. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, before we get to the news, let's take a look at all the headlines. World leaders will launch an ambitious attempt to tackle global warming. The R28 between Western Area and Vereniging in Gauteng was reopened late yesterday following a horrific crash that claimed 19 lives. And Pope Francis will end his three-nation African tour today with a visit to a mosque in the capital of the Central African Republic. Those are all your headlines, but before we get into it, let's find out from Kendall Mokhamato what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Good morning, Elvis. Quite a lot happening over the weekend, but before I get too far ahead of myself, let's greet everybody at home as well. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. So close, yet so far for Orlando Pirates as they lose 1-0 to a highly organized Etoile du Sahel in Tunisia.
It's Charles Schwartzel again.
Charles Schwartzel wins the Alfred Dunhill at Leopards Creek, becoming the first South African to win the same European Tour tournament 4 times.
Nico Rosberg comes out of the last corner in Abu Dhabi to take victory here in Abu Dhabi, his 6th win of 20.
Nico Rosberg closes off the season with a hat-trick of wins as Mercedes powers into a record 12th 1-2 finish of the year.
Nico Rosberg. Massa finished in 8th place in the end. Romain Grosjean in his last race for the Lotus team finished in 9th.
That's it. What's what we've got for you in the sports later on today, 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Unbelievable race there. Thank you, Kendall. Let's now take it from the top. Our top story this hour. World leaders will launch an ambitious attempt today to tackle global warming. They have arrived at the United Nations climate change talks in Paris for 2 weeks of tough talking. The gathering follows the failure of a previous summit in Copenhagen 6 years ago. Since then, pressure to tackle the causes of rising temperatures has risen. Many scientists say failure to agree on strong measures in Paris will doom the world to ever hotter average temperatures. Now, President Jacob Zuma says South Africa will do all that it can to ensure the success of the COP21 talks in Paris. South Africa launched the negotiations that will conclude this year at COP17 in Durban in 2011.
From Durban to here, there has been the work to ensure that we come out of this climate change conference with an agreement that is legally binding to all nations, given the fact that the threat of climate change is a serious one against humanity. And we need to agree that for us to save humanity, we need to move together. We need to agree. In other words, we need to put aside the interests or national interests of different countries. We've got to put the interests of the people globally. We are therefore hoping that at the end of this, the outcome should be the outcome that is acceptable by the citizens of the world. It should not go according to what others think, because if we do so, you are actually playing a very dangerous game, because it means the changes that are being brought by the emissions will actually move, and they could even destroy humanity. And I think it's a matter of logic that therefore we should agree to have a kind of an agreement that will be binding to all of us.
The National Institute for Communicable Diseases says climate change affects social and environmental roots of health, from clean air, safe drinking water, sufficient food, and even secure shelter. Extreme high air temperatures also contribute directly to deaths from cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, particularly among elderly people. Natural disasters and variable rainfall patterns have an impact globally. The number of reported weather-related natural disasters has more than tripled since the 1960s. Every year, these disasters result in over 60,000 deaths, mainly in developing countries.
The current drought and peculiar weather patterns experienced in various parts of South Africa are an urgent call that everyone should take appropriate action towards combating the impact of climate change. Some people and organizations across the world are doing their part to combat the change. The annual Earth Hour, organized by the WWF, took place earlier this year. The campaign is aimed at promoting awareness of global warming, with about 162 countries taking part in switching off their lights for an hour. Earlier in the year, a group of students from the University of Johannesburg and lecturers took a road trip of over 4,000 kilometers to test out their solar-powered car fueled on nothing but good old sunshine. In Nigeria, a startup company, Green Energy and Biofuels, is converting waste from sawdust and water hyacinth into clean-burning fuels. This is designed specially for cooking stoves as part of its initiative to reduce dangerous smoke and gases from homes. Today marks the first day of COP21, which takes place in the French capital until December 11th, where countries are hoping to achieve a legally binding and universal agreement on climate.
And back home, the R28 between Western Area and Vereniging in Gauteng was reopened late yesterday following a horrific crash that claimed 19 lives. 8 women, 6 men and 5 young boys lost their lives when a taxi collided with a truck before bursting into flames. It's not clear where the taxi was coming from, but police believe it was going to Carltonville. 5 people were taken to hospital. The Office of the Public Protector has revealed that among the corruption cases it's been investigating this year, Northwest Province tops the list. At least 5 municipalities in the province are under administration amid alleged maladministration, mismanagement of finances and corruption. Also, 4 provincial departments have been placed under financial administration. The Deputy Public Protector, Advocate Kevin Malunga, says there are governance challenges in this province.
The challenge is the Northwest is not doing too well in terms of perception and image. I am here more than any other province. So there are governance challenges, serious governance challenges at the municipal level in terms of municipalities. A lot of municipalities here are under administration. The biggest challenge here is more with municipalities, and of course many complaints in the system.
More than 180 motorists are scheduled to appear in court in various towns today after they were caught allegedly driving under the influence of alcohol this weekend. The Road Traffic Management Corporation spokesperson Simon Zwane says the highest number of arrests were made in Brits in the northwest, where a total of 27 motorists were arrested. Provincial traffic officers were out in full force following the launch of the National Festive Season Road Safety Plan on Thursday. Gautrain Management Agency says that power has been restored to one of the 2 lines between Pretoria and Hatfield. Gautrain management workers worked through the night to repair the railway line. Services between Pretoria and Hatfield were disrupted on Saturday morning when a truck driver lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a wall that borders the tracks. The Gautrain is an 80-kilometer mass rapid transit railway system in Gauteng, which links Johannesburg, Pretoria, Ekurhuleni and OR Tambo International Airport. Further afield now, the European Union and Turkey have agreed on measures to stem the flow of migrants and refugees into Europe, following a day of negotiations in Brussels in Belgium. Turkey will help stem the flow of migrants to Europe in return for cash, visas and renewed talks on joining the EU in a deal struck yesterday that the Turkish Prime Minister called a new beginning for the uneasy neighbours. Leaders of the 28 European Union states met Turkish Premier Ahmet Davutoglu in Brussels to give their collective political blessings to an agreement hammered out by diplomats over the past few weeks.
Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu is calling it a new beginning for the uneasy neighbours.
An agreement has been finalized between Turkey and European Union leaders, with Turkey promising to help stem the flow of migrants to Europe in return for cash, visas, and renewed talks on joining the EU. Speaking in Brussels on Sunday, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker says money will be provided for the 2.2 million Syrians now in Turkey.
We're prepared to make available a sum of 3 billion euros. These 3 billion are not being given with no strings attached. They are earmarked for use in a way to be determined jointly with the Turkish authorities.
Leaders say the money is intended to raise Syrians' standard of living to persuade more of them to stay within Turkish borders, hoping to avoid scenes like this. Also on offer to Ankara is a re-energized negotiating process on Turkish membership of the EU, something Davutoglu says he's grateful for.
My colleagues in Europe, they agree that Turkey and EU have the same destiny as the members of the family of our continent, and Turkish membership will be an asset.
Summit Chairman Donald Tusk stressed the meeting was primarily about migration rather than improving Turkish ties, as Europeans struggle to limit the strain of taking in hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees.
The V&A Waterfront's ongoing drive to safeguard both its historic and environmental legacy was rewarded with Heritage Platinum status in recognition of efforts to preserve the property's unique history. Waterfront management in Cape Town also announced a forward-thinking plan to introduce a 20 million rand solar project that will significantly reduce the reliance on the national grid. Now, to talk to us more about this and give us more information is our reporter, Mariska Botha, live from Cape Town. Mariska, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Hi, good morning to you. Yes, we're coming to you from the V&A Waterfront in Cape Town. Of course, it's one of those iconic places in Cape Town, one of the most visited spots in Cape Town and one of the so-called top 6. It's one of the places that people recommend people visit to come see what's going on here. It's also a working harbour. So as you can imagine, there's hundreds of thousands of tourists and Cape Townians and local visitors that come through here every year. So it is a property that's very much reliant on energy to sustain itself and keep itself going. But of course now they're trying to do things a little bit differently. And today we're seeing the switching on of solar panels that has been installed on 6 of its 8 buildings here at the waterfront. And they say that will dramatically reduce their reliance on Eskom's grid. But to speak to us a little bit more on that, we have Gregory Cooper. He's the Managing Director of Solar World Africa. And they were actually the manufacturers of the panels that you could maybe see here behind us. And he's going to tell us a little bit more about how all of this is going to work. Gregory, good morning to you and welcome to the show. First of all, how many solar panels are we talking about and what kind of output will they give the waterfront?
We are talking about 4,200 solar panels here on that installation, and the output is 1.6 million kilowatt hours or units of electricity produced per year for the next 25, 30, 35 years, as long as the system remains on the roof.
It's, of course, one of the largest in Africa at the moment, one of the largest installations in Africa at the moment. But in layman's terms, what does that output mean? How will it all work, and will it run into the grid? Will it go into batteries? Just talk us a little bit through that.
Yeah. The system as such is one of the largest rooftop installations in South Africa, in Southern Africa, that's right. In layman's terms, to say it will power like 300, 350 households for the whole year, just to compare it against what you would expect in, let's say, private consumption. The system as such is an excellent example for embedded generation. That means for the production of solar electricity out of the sun and with the consumption during daytime. So there's no batteries involved. This system here is in sync with the national grid, and as the electricity is produced, it's consumed here in the buildings, and that's obviously taking place during daytime.
And you say that's of course the way of the future. What do you mean by that? The way that the electricity is running into the grid and not stored in batteries?
Look, if you do have got a grid, it's a substantially more efficient way not to go via the battery, because with the grid you have got literally the storage facility, let's say it this way. You just implement or feed the electricity into the grid and take it out from there again when you need it. The battery backup is obviously something which is very important, but that also depends where you set up solar systems.
It might be expensive initially to install this, but you say you guarantee 25 years of use out of this. Why is it important that we move towards energy like this, saving in the long run like that?
Look, if you look into South Africa's energy mix in the future, we are currently heavily reliant on coal. And solar is, I believe, with other renewable energies, definitely the way forward. I think that's out of discussion. Now, if you look into what you can achieve with a solar system in terms of price-wise, it's competitive against the classic generation cost of classic energy sources like coal or gas or nuclear electricity. And it can be implemented very fast.
And also, one silly little question, what happens when it rains? We have lovely sunshine here today, it's going to be very warm in Cape Town. But what happens in June, July, August when it's overcast and raining here? Does the system still function as it does now?
It does, but obviously not with the same efficiency. So a sunny day like this gives the utmost production out of the system, but on a cloudy day, rainy day, even in winter, the system produces between 20, 25 to 35, 40%, depending on the total cloud cover.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was Gregory Cooper, and he's, of course, the Managing Director of Solar World Africa. They were the manufacturers of the panels. And in a little while, we're going to have a little ceremony. There will be a ribbon cutting where they will officially switch on the use of these solar panels. And, of course, as Mr. Cooper said, this is the way forward. And this is one of the largest rooftop installations in Southern Africa, at the very least. And this will, of course, change the way that things are run here at the V&A waterfront, which is one of the most visited spots in Cape Town, very popular with tourists, and of course they're very heavily reliant on energy, but this will definitely change the way business is done here at the waterfront. With that, it's back to you in the studio. Elvis.
Thank you, Mariska. That is absolutely wonderful. That's the way to go. Renewable energy, that's our theme for today, of course. COP21 is underway, and we keep that and keep you updated on what's happening around the country. Pretoria, you've heard, have now implemented buses that runs on gas, compressed gas, that is. So what more can we do in this country? What can you do as an individual to change that perspective? We also have a question for you today on the COP21 as the parties meet out in Paris. We want to see if we can have that question up on the screen for you again, so you can we can invite you to communicate with us and let us know what's on your mind in terms of COP21 and renewable energy, and how do we change that. Let's see if we can have that on the screen, if we can at any time soon. We can have that and let you know what's on your mind. But for an update on COP21, we now cross to our UK correspondent, Dan Whitehead, who is covering the summit. Dan, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning to you from Paris.
Can you give us an update, Dan, with regards to the summit underway?
Yes, absolutely. World leaders, including President Zuma, arriving here at the huge venue where COP21 is being held. Just to give you an idea of the scale here, around 190 countries being represented, more than 140 world leaders gathering here, 40,000 delegates in total attending this 12-day summit, where the aim is to come to agreements between all the countries over new ideas, legally binding ideas, of how they prevent world global temperatures from rising by more than 2 degrees Celsius. The current trend, to put it into context, if nothing is done, is world temperatures going up by as much as 5 degrees Celsius. Now, that could cause the same level of increase which caused the last ice age. So the scientists and experts gathering here in Paris say this is a make-or-break situation, and that actions and legally binding agreements must be achieved at this summit if we're not to continue seeing devastating climate change actions and severe weather patterns which have already affected many countries around the world.
Have all the world leaders arrived in Paris as yet?
They are arriving as we speak at around 12 noon here, so around 1 o'clock afternoon South Africa time. The world leaders will begin each speaking. They get 3 minutes each. It has to be very limited due to such the high number of world leaders who are gathering here. They get 3 minutes each, and President Zuma speaking in the first hour of that section to really outline what each country plans to do and outlining their commitment to the process of COP21 over the fortnight. And essentially the consensus being that they will want to all limit the use of greenhouse gases while allowing the economy, and especially the economies of developing countries, to continue to grow. And that is a theme which will be seen throughout COP21, just how developed countries help developing countries to achieve their climate change goals.
Now, 2 degrees is the 2 degrees Celsius is the figure being mentioned. But what else can we expect in contrast to the previous summit, which was held in Copenhagen?
Well, absolutely. And famously, the Copenhagen meeting back in 2009 was not successful, and there was not clear agreement between the countries. I think that there is certainly an emphasis from all the countries that there has to be agreement this time, because the protocols and agreements which were agreed in Kyoto run out in 2020. And so this is the last COP meeting to lock down any firm agreement. And I think that there is consensus, certainly from government organizations and scientific organizations around the world, that if goals are not agreed and legally binding goals are not agreed this time round, then it may well be too late. And the challenge is absolutely huge, because to meet that 2 degrees Celsius goal, it would mean a cut in emissions, in CO2 emissions, of between 40 and 70% over the next 35 years. So there is a real focus on renewable energies and a transfer of technology between the developed world, developed countries and developing countries, and that's something which President Zuma is expected to outline during his speech here. He'll also be meeting with the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon for a half-an-hour one-on-one meeting to outline his goals and South Africa's goals specifically. But President Zuma seeking a fair and ambitious, legally binding agreement, and that's what he says will mark the success of COP21.
Dan, thank you so much for that update. That was our correspondent in Paris, Dan Whitehead, with the latest, and he'll keep us updated as to the conference as it unfolds there. But right now, we'll take a break, and we'll be right back with Kendall Bakamate and your sports news.
Kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Kendall Makamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Orlando Pirates' hopes of a second continental crown in 20 years were dashed by Etoile du Sahel following a 1-0 defeat in the CAF Confederation Cup final second leg. A first-half goal by Etoile captain Amar Jamal, the same man who scored in the dying seconds of the first leg, was enough to give the Tunisian side a 2-1 aggregate win over the Buccaneers in Sousse.
The home side enjoyed territorial advantage in the first quarter of the match, and Pirates keeper Felipe Obono was called into action twice in the opening stages. Midway in the first half, the home side lost their leading goal scorer Baghdad Boneja due to an injury. 4 minutes later, Amar Jamal, The man who broke Pirates' hearts with a late goal last week put his side in the lead. The Tunisian defender again benefited from another defensive mistake by the South Africans.
Came to South Africa, found a late equaliser.
Pirates had a frustrating first half, and their strikers often mistimed their runs and squandered some goal-scoring opportunities. With nothing to lose, Pirates started the second half well. They launched waves of attacks and had the Tunisians under pressure. Thabo Rakgale had a golden opportunity to equalize, but his first touch let him down.
Rakgale outside, but Boli's read it beautifully.
Late in the game, the Sahel goalkeeper and Tunisian international Ayman Matlodi produced two brilliant saves to deny Tamsan Ngakabuza and Sfiso Myeni. This was the first time in the campaign that Pirates had failed to score. It was a brave performance by the men in black, but in the end, it was not enough. Thabo Daniels, SABC News.
And Charles Schwartzel won the Alfred Dunhill Championship at Leopard Creek near Malilani in Mpumalanga for the fourth time this weekend. At 31, he also becomes the youngest South African to 10 times on the European tour, eclipsing Ernie Els, who was a year older when he got into double figures at the 2002 Dubai Desert Classic. Frenchmen Gregory Bordy and Sebastian Herbert were second and third, respectively.
Schwartzel got his final round off to a rocky start as he attempted to make history at the Alfred Dunhill Championship. He dropped short on the third and reduced his lead to 2 shots over the French duo Gregory Bordy and Benjamin Herbert, while his playing partner Sebastian Gross made a double bogey to drop to 8 under. Schwartzel had problems with his long game on Saturday, but all looked in good order on Sunday. Bordy then made it 3 birdies in a row on the par 3 fifth to join Herbert at 10 under. But it was Schwartzel's day. After 1 over par front 9, the 31-year-old steadied the ship on the back 9 with 3 birdies in 4 holes from the 11th to take a 4-stroke lead into the final hole.
Yeah, my chipping was really fantastic on the weekend, and I had a great chip, and that sort of got it going. Made birdie on 11 and 13 and 14. I knew I was going to have to shoot at least 2 or 3 under on the back 9 to give myself a good chance of winning, and I was very happy that it worked out.
Schwartzel is the 3rd South African to win 10 European Tour events behind Ernie Els and Retief Goosen.
It's Charles Schwartzel again at Leopard Creek. 4 wins on this great golf course, the first South African to win the same European Tour event 4 times.
And in other sports news making headlines over the weekend, Mercedes' Nico Rosberg won his 6th Formula One race of the season, claiming the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the last race of the season. Mercedes, the Constructors' champions, recorded their 12th 1-2 finish this season as drivers' champion Lewis Hamilton took 2nd place.
Lights out, away we go.
Rosberg made pole position count at the Yas Marina circuit, while his Mercedes teammate and world champion Lewis Hamilton was slow off the line. Kimi Räikkönen in the Ferrari was nipping at his heels. There was early contact as Fernando Alonso and Pastor Maldonado went off at turn 1. Maldonado was forced to stop. Alonso in the McLaren suffered a damaged front wing. Valtteri Bottas and Jenson Button offered more evidence to an observation this season that the action in the paddock has been better than the racing.
His team cuts across, and Bottas, well, is going to make it a long afternoon.
The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is the race that starts in daylight and ends under floodlights. Rosberg was still in control at the halfway mark. Ironically, he's been the dominant driver ever since his teammate Hamilton won a 3rd Drivers' Championship. Hamilton launched one final attack on the race leader as both the race and the season came to an end. However, Rosberg led from start to finish for his 3rd Grand Prix win in a row.
Big donut for Nico Rosberg.
Hamilton got his 6th second-place finish, with Räikkönen 3rd. Simon Burke, SABC News.
And in tennis news, world number 2, Andy Murray, ended Great Britain's 79-year wait for a 10th Davis Cup title when he defeated Belgium's David Goffin 6-3, 7-5, 6-3 in Gaunt on Sunday. despite the fact that Goffin was playing on clay, his preferred surface, and in front of a boisterous 13,000 capacity crowd at the Flanders Expo Centre. Two-time major winner Murray put his opponent to the sword to complete victory for Leon Smith's side.
The long wait is over. After 79 years, the drought ended there with the most magnificent finish from Andy Murray. Great Britain are Davis Cup champions once again. It's their title for a 10th time. And their magnificent leading man comes up trumps and has to come up off the floor to applaud the beaten Belgian who gave it his all, but could not handle this world-class athlete, this supreme tennis player from Great Britain, who has led from the front and then some. What a performance once again from Andy Murray. What a conclusion.
Now, that's being hailed as probably Great Britain's greatest performance in this last year. Now, Kenya, facing scrutiny from world anti-doping officials and criticism that it's not doing enough to tackle the problem, has banned 7 more athletes for doping offences, raising the total number of Kenyan drug cases in the last 3 years to 40. Now, in a statement, Athletics Kenya said it had confirmed the sanctions against 7 athletes for a range of drug offences. The list includes Emily Shebe, a double world cross-country champion and Commonwealth Games bronze medalist. She was handed a 4-year ban after testing positive for a diuretic. Joyce Zakari, a 400-meter runner, and hurdle Koki Manunga were also given 4-year bans. The latest list also includes 4 long-distance runners. That's Agnes Chepuskoi and Bernard Mwendia, Judy Jesire Kimuge, and Lilian Marita. They were each suspended for between 2 and 4 years. Allegations of corruption among Athletics Kenya chiefs tied to a corporate sponsorship deal combined with Russia's recent ban from global athletics have stirred fears that the East African nation could be banned from international track and field. In total, 43 Kenyans have been suspended for doping, with 40 of those in the last 3 years, including Rita Jepto, who won the Boston and Chicago marathons. And that's where we leave it with the sport. Over now to Evan Janssen, who's standing by.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Time now for us to shift our focus to what's happening here on the African continent. Let's take a look at the top stories. Pope Francis arrived in the Central African Republic yesterday for the 3rd and final leg of his first visit to Africa, which started on Wednesday last week in Kenya. He's scheduled to return to Rome later today after celebrating Mass at Bangui's soccer stadium and visiting a mosque in an effort to bridge the religious divide in a nation racked by more than 3 years of violence. Security was tight as more than 5 million people gathered to cast their ballots in a first presidential and legislative election in Burkina Faso after a popular uprising toppled the West African nation's longtime leader Blaise Compaoré. Independent National Electoral Commission President Barthélemy Kere has described the elections as generally satisfactory. Nigeria's main opposition party, the National Movement for the Development of Society, yesterday announced Sani Umaru as its candidate to contest an election in February against President Mahamadou Issoufou, who is seeking a second 5-year term. Umaru served as Prime Minister from 2007 to 2009, and it will be the second time that he'll be running for the presidency. Of course, COP21 gets underway in Paris today. We asked you the question of the day with regard to this. Is there the political will for world leaders to come together and come up with a deal at the end of the year? Now, in light of the COP21 summit that starts later, we thought we'd take a look at South Africa's oil economy and the impacts that exploration of oil and gas, for that matter, may have on the environment. Now, joining us in studio again is the Chief Economist at Investment Solutions, Lesiba Motata, who's with us every week. Very good morning to you, Lesiba. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Evan. Yeah.
COP21 underway today. Before we get into what's happening on the African continent, I wanted to ask our viewers' question to you today, and maybe you can tell us from a sort of investment perspective if you see the economic and political will, for that matter. There's the question: is there the global political will to deal with climate change? What do you think?
I think there's indeed a will. There are impacts that are felt everywhere. If you can recall, this is all countries gathering together. In China, the impact of climate change is quite impactful. I was in Beijing about more than a year ago. The smog situation is so in your face, you cannot see the next skyscraper. Really? And when we were there, we were lucky because it was a clear sky. But a few days later, people were wearing masks, etc., because of the pollution. It's so tangible, and I do think that the worlds are very committed to getting, one, new technology in terms of generating power, in terms of how you do business. Going green is a big thing that's going to happen. I think there's a lot of legs in these conversations.
On the African continent, though, it seems as if we are not on top of the latest, very latest, let's call it technological solutions when it comes to, let's talk about generating capacity for power and the like. All around the African continent, we now see exploration for oil and gas, when some would argue that we should be looking at hydropower, at solar power and the like, wind power. Why do you think on the African continent are we still looking at the next 30 years, it seems like, at oil and gas?
The traditional ways of producing energy. Well, it remains viable, because if you think about these economies, the US has grown. Its per capita income is sitting at $40,000 US. We in South Africa are sitting around 6,000. Everywhere else in Africa, it's even less than 1,000 per capita GDP. So in order to grow, you still need to source power generation to fuel your economy from the traditional sources. Can be cleaned, can be green, although a lot more expensive. But if you have the traditional way of doing things, oil and gas, you augment with renewables, something that South Africa is actually getting its head upon. Also, in Rwanda, you also find that solar and renewables are a big thing there. While you augment the need for energy because it's so great, there's an interesting map that we get to see in space. If you look at Africa, the African continent, at night, it's just really spotted with a few lights here and there, just showing you how the need for power is needed. It's really quite dark elsewhere, just concentrated in South Africa with a few lights of power at night.
We've got to power the African century.
We need to do that.
I want to ask you about COP21 and what do you think the key aspects will be of the discussions around oil and gas exploration. What do you think those key points of discussion will be at COP21 this week?
Part of the discussions with these nations is to say, is it sustainable to, for example, have the United States continuing to invest into shale gas in a precipitous way? They've actually put a lot of money, which is all borrowed, and right now you're beginning to see that oil and gas companies, particularly in the United States, are beginning to feel the pinch of the lower oil price. They've committed for multi-years of production in oil that contributes to oversupply in that industry. But where we sit now, it remains suspect whether they'll survive this lower oil price. They could go bankrupt. It could create a crisis in the banking sector like we had in 2008. And therein are some of the discussions that needs to be had.
What about deep water taxes and these sorts of let's call them external forces that are, how do you think this will affect the ocean economy?
The ocean economy. Increasingly what we're seeing is that nations are increasingly wanting to open up their borders. They don't want to be more protectionists. They want to be more liberal and do things together. It's expressed in the G20 in their recent discussion. I think COP21 also just on a very focused basis, they will continue to open up and chat from that basis. I really don't think that countries are increasingly wanting to be protectionist, because in this one, it's a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
For example, El Nino, while one part is feeling the drought, El Nino, other parts are experiencing excessive rain, La Nina.
Yeah.
So all those combinations means there's got to be a concerted effort from everyone on the table to make it count. And we have seen it in previous conversations that everyone wants to participate as opposed to be more protectionist.
Yeah.
They want to engage with one another.
South Africa and Africa, are we going to get on top of our environmental concerns in the short and medium term?
You know, it's a tough one. I think there's two ways of thinking about this. On the one hand, for developed economies that have grown, they can put much more stringent conditions in terms of how they produce that economic growth going forward. But for Africa, where the need is much greater, many of these countries are only sitting below $50 billion in size.
Yeah.
They're really quite small.
Yeah.
They need to have cheaper ways of sourcing power, cheaper ways of sourcing energy, and the environmental context, while not to be ignored, I do think we need to have a more relaxed consideration in terms of how that comes about, because it's onerous.
Yeah.
It's expensive to actually say, you know, we mustn't produce, for example, power from coal. The costs of it are quite dire. To this day, China is still struggling to that and continues to pollute the air.
It does.
Yep.
It's a delicate balance. Let's hope they find it this week. Lesibo, lovely to have you with us as always. Every Monday morning, Lesibo Motate is the chief economist at Investment Solutions here in South Africa. He comes and gives us his views, which are very informed as always. Thanks, Lesibo.
Thank you very much. See you next week.
Fantastic. Now we move on with what is happening on the continent. Africa's biggest AIDS conference began in Harare, Zimbabwe, last night. The International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, ICASA, will draw close to 4,000 experts and government officials from around the continent. It comes amidst warnings that the continent risks losing ground in its fight if the programs are not intensified.
Explicit instructions on how to use condoms safely are boomed over a loudspeaker, where years ago it would have been unthinkable for Zimbabweans to be seen at such a roadshow. These crowds are a sign of the changing times. Condomize, a project of the United Nations Population Fund, has distributed tens of thousands of condoms in the last 3 days and is breaking myths about the disease.
People are embarrassed and they are shy to talk about condoms, but they think prostitutes are the only people who use condoms.
Zimbabwe officials say 108 million pieces were distributed last year alone, along with 5 million female condoms, the continent's highest uptake.
Zimbabwe is one of the countries where condoms have really been accepted. And in terms of our HIV prevalence, we are one country where we have managed to almost have the infections.
As the country commemorates 30 years since its first HIV diagnosis, it's hosting Africa's largest AIDS conference. Here, the continent is expected to commit to intensifying the fight over the next 5 years.
The trajectory of the epidemic has been broken. It's smaller now than it was 10 years ago. That's a good thing. That's a fine thing. But if people now rest on those laurels and say that's a good enough job, then the epidemic will still be at unsustainable levels for generations and generations to come.
Top of the agenda, discussing goals for universal access to antiretroviral treatment in light of new studies that prove that every HIV-positive person should be on treatment. The ICASA conference will also tackle emerging fault lines.
One of the things that is particularly evident is the extent to which young women, especially those young women just moving into adulthood, the rates of HIV amongst that cohort of young women go up alarmingly from the age of 15, 16, 17, 18.
The prospect of an HIV-free generation is still far off, but the conference hopes that its strategies will keep every infected person alive. Shingai Nyoka, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Tomorrow, of course, World AIDS Day. We'll have special reportage throughout the show tomorrow on HIV/AIDS and those that are affected and living with this disease. Now, for more on this particular story, let's join our reporter, Shinganyoka, who is in Harare, Zimbabwe, for an update. A very good morning to you, Shingai. Thanks for joining us.
Morning to you, Eben.
Shingai, significant at this conference is that for the first time the Zimbabwean government invited sex workers and then the LGBT community to come and take part. How should we see that from outside?
Well, I think people might read more into this than there actually is. ICASA is the organizing group, and it has invited a cross-section of people to attend this particular conference. We've seen or we've heard of reports of confrontations between some of the representatives of the gay community at this particular conference. And very succinctly yesterday, the Zimbabwe Vice President reasserted Zimbabwe's position that no country should force Zimbabwe to accept new rights, rights that it doesn't accept. So, I mean, clearly the government is still stuck in its position that it is not willing to recognize gay rights. Having said that, there were messages in the opening last night which really spoke to the acknowledgement that and the recognition that there needs to be a broad-based intervention that doesn't discriminate whether you're talking about prostitutes or whether you're talking about homosexuality, that really everybody who is infected should be able to access treatment. But really at this stage there is no movement from the government of Zimbabwe in terms of recognizing the gay community.
How significant is it then how significant is the fact that Zimbabwe is hosting this conference?
Well, Zimbabwe is hosting this conference by default. This conference was supposed to be held in Tunisia, but because of the violence and the violent attacks that happened there, Zimbabwe put in a bid to host this conference at a very last at the last stage. But really, the importance for Zimbabwe in particular is the fact that it's recognized as one of the countries that has put in place self-financing strategies in the fight against HIV, for example, with its AIDS levy, and also the fact that it's been able to bring down infections from about 33% to about 15%. And so really there is a recognition that Zimbabwe has been able to break the back of the disease to a certain extent.
What is the reportage in Zimbabwe saying? Why is this? Is it because of education programs, or is it because of high levels of education within the country itself?
Well, from what we understand, it's the efforts of the former health minister, Timothy Stamps, have really been acknowledged here. One of the reasons why Zimbabwe was forced to introduce an AIDS levy was at a very difficult political time in the country, where financing was falling away from the international community, and it was increasingly isolated. And so it really had to look in itself. Other countries have also been acknowledged in terms of their fight against HIV and AIDS. South Africa is one of them. It's one of the three countries, including Namibia and Swaziland, which, for example, has been able to put 95% of HIV-positive mothers on antiretrovirals to prevent mother-to-child transmission. And so really there's pockets of success across the continent. And Southern Africa is at the forefront of this.
Shingai, in conclusion, tomorrow, of course, is World AIDS Day. How is this day perceived in Zimbabwe, and what kind of programs will be on the cards?
Well, there are a lot of programs that have come about as a result of this particular conference. You saw in the footage that I filed the story about the distribution of condoms and education, and one of the technologies that will be introduced at this particular conference is self-testing. And so that's so some of those kits will be distributed. But really, there'll be a lot of focus on discussions about financing and how to ensure that the adolescents in particular, who account for the majority of the new infections, are educated so that they don't either contract the disease or that they know their status and go for treatment.
Shinga, thank you very much for that update. That is our Zimbabwean correspondent, Shinga Nyoka, giving us an update on the ICASA conference taking place there now. Minister in the presidency, Jeff Radebe, called on Africa's local governments to drive national policies to assist countries to manage the challenges of rapid urbanization and cross-border migration. Radebe delivered the keynote address at the opening of the AfriCities Summit in northern Johannesburg. South Africa is hosting the 7th edition of the local government conference.
Over 3,000 delegates from municipalities spanning Africa's 4 regions are gathered in Sandton, northern Johannesburg, for a 5-day summit to find solutions to challenges facing Africa's municipalities. Minister in the presidency, Jeff Radebe, says rapid urbanization and mass human migrations place the biggest burden on municipalities.
Africa is urbanizing quickly. High levels of urbanization and concentration can lead to exponential increases in economic growth and development if positive energies of our people are harnessed and channeled in the right direction.
Rural areas, especially when it comes to the youth, experience a large exodus of young people in search of opportunities.
The city of Johannesburg's mayor, Park Stau, says his municipality is leading the charge in protecting the environment.
Local government is the indispensable vehicle through which our socio-political and development agenda is driven. In this regard, it is important to note that the year 2015 has been an important global year for local government.
Speakers also emphasized the critical role municipalities need to play in optimizing national resources to develop Africa in line with the African Union's Agenda 2063. Dumalo Mutlaudi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Time now for us to take a quick look at the front pages from around the African continent. We'll start in Swaziland today. The Swaziland Observer reports there that the Swaziland Sugar Association is optimistic that it can provide up to 160 megawatts of renewable baseload electricity power for the country and create an additional 5,500 jobs. Other side of Southern Africa, the Namibian says the SWAPO party has won control of all of Namibia's regional councils for the first time since the country's independence, and with it, total domination of the National Council there. Finally, in Nigeria, the Vanguard reports that President Muhammadu Buhari was believed to have left Malta, where he participated in the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting for Paris last night to join about 150 other world leaders at the Conference of Parties, also known as COP21 on climate change. Don't forget our question of the day. We're dealing with COP21. We want to know from you, is there globally the political will for a climate deal or a deal to, well, come up with a deal to deal with climate change? On that note, let's go to the weather now, continental weather, that is.
victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back. Because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
It's 1100 hours Central African time on this Monday, the last day of November 2015. This is Newsroom. A very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, let's take a look at all your news headlines. World leaders will launch an ambitious attempt to tackle global warming. The R28 between Western Naria and Vereniging in Gauteng was reopened late yesterday following a horrific crash that claimed 19 lives. And Pope Francis will end his three-nation African tour today with a visit to a mosque in the capital of the Central African Republic. Now, those are all your headlines, but first, before we get to your news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning.
Good morning, Elvis, and good morning to everybody at home as well. There's quite a lot happening in the sports, and this is what it is for you later on into 11:30 today. So close yet so far for Orlando Pirates as they lose 1-0 to highly organized Etoile du Sahel in Tunisia.
It's Charles Schwartzel again.
Charles Schwartzel wins the Alfred Dunhill at Leopard Creek, becoming the first South African to win the same European Tour tournament 4 times.
Rosberg comes out of the last corner in Abu Dhabi to take victory here in Abu Dhabi, his 6th win of
Nico Rosberg closes off the season with a hat-trick of wins as Mercedes powers into a record 12th 1-2 finish of the year. That in a nutshell is what we've got for you. We'll also be chatting at 11:30 to David Kikana to do a wrap of some of the football action from the weekend. Back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's now take a look at your top story this hour. World leaders will launch an ambitious attempt today to tackle global warming. They have arrived at the United Nations climate change talks in Paris for 2 weeks of tough talking. The gathering follows the failure of a previous summit in Copenhagen 6 years ago. Since then, pressure to tackle the causes of rising temperatures has risen. Many scientists say failure to agree on strong measures in Paris will doom the world to ever hotter average temperatures. President Jacob Zuma says that South Africa will do all that it can to ensure the success of the COP21 talks in Paris. South Africa launched the negotiations that will conclude this year at COP17 in Durban in 2011.
From Durban to here, there has been the work to ensure that we come out of this climate change conference with an agreement that is legally binding to all nations, given the fact that the threat of climate change is a serious one against humanity. And we need to agree that for us to save humanity, we need to move together. We need to agree. In other words, we need to put aside the interests or national interests of different countries. We've got to put the interests of the people globally. We are therefore hoping that at the end of this, the outcome should be the outcome that is acceptable by the citizens of the world. It should not go according to what others think, because if we do so, you are actually playing a very dangerous game, because it means the changes that are being brought by the emissions will actually move, and they could even destroy humanity. And I think it's a matter of logic that therefore we should agree to have a kind of an agreement that will be binding to all of us.
Meanwhile, the National Institute for Communicable Diseases says climate change affects social and environmental roots of health, from clean air to safe drinking water, sufficient food, and even secure shelter. Extreme high temperatures also contribute directly to deaths from cardiovascular and respiratory disease, particularly among elderly people. Natural disasters and variable rainfall patterns have an impact globally. The number of reported weather-related natural disasters has more than tripled since the 1960s. Every year, these disasters result in over 60,000 deaths, mainly in the developing countries.
The current drought and peculiar weather patterns experienced in various parts of South Africa are an urgent call that everyone should take appropriate action towards combating the impact of climate change. Some people and organizations across the world are doing their part to combat the change. The annual Earth Hour, organized by the WWF, took place earlier this year. The campaign is aimed at promoting awareness of global warming, with about 162 countries taking part in switching off their lights for an hour. Earlier in the year, a group of students from the University of Johannesburg and lecturers took a road trip of over 4,000 kilometers to test out their solar-powered car fueled on nothing but good old sunshine. In Nigeria, a startup company, Green Energy and Biofuels, is converting waste from sawdust and water hyacinth into clean-burning fuels. This is designed specially for cooking stoves as part of its initiative to reduce dangerous smoke and gases from homes. Today marks the first day of COP21, which takes place in the French capital until December 11th, where countries are hoping to achieve a legally binding and universal agreement on climate.
And back home, the R28 between Western Area and Vereniging in Gauteng was reopened late yesterday following a horrific crash that claimed 19 lives. 8 women, 6 men and 5 young boys lost their lives when a taxi collided with a truck before bursting into flames. It's not clear where the taxi was coming from, but police believed it was going to Carltonville. 5 people were taken to hospital. Now, more than 180 motorists are scheduled to appear in court in various towns today after they were caught allegedly driving under the influence of alcohol this weekend. The Road Traffic Management Corporation spokesperson Simon Zwane says the highest number of arrests were made in Brits in the northwest, where a total of 27 motorists were arrested. Provincial traffic officers were out in full force following the launch of the National Festive Season Road Safety Plan on Thursday. The Gautrain Management Agency says power has been restored to one of the 2 lines between Pretoria and Hatfield. Gautrain management workers worked through the night to repair the railway line. Services between Pretoria and Hatfield were disrupted on Saturday morning when a truck driver lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a wall that borders the tracks. The Gautrain is an 80-kilometer mass rapid transit railway system in Gauteng province which links Johannesburg, Pretoria, Ekurhuleni and the OR Tambo International Airport. Head of the United Nations Environment Programme in South Africa, Cecilia Njenga, says that the COP21 summit is an historic moment and the outcome will give the world the opportunity to tackle the challenge of climate change. Earlier this morning, we spoke to Cecilia and asked her if there is the political will to come up with a climate deal this week in Paris.
Our experience in the last couple of months, there have been a series of meetings this year, is that indeed there is a trend towards a common agreement. There are definitely contentious areas, which I will speak to if you do allow me later on. But we do seem to have some common understanding. The group of 77, together with Africa, seem to be converging to certain levels of agreement. There are indeed aspects between the developing countries would want to see much more commitment from the developed countries, particularly in the ambitions, as you mentioned earlier. We would like to see a trend towards where the ambition is improved, as you said, before the pre-industrial period. So that, because when the 2-degree ambition, what the African countries are saying is that ambition is not adequate. And it will not see the temperatures reduce to the level of 1.5 degrees. We would like to see an ambition where the developed countries commit to a much more higher ambition of about 3 degrees centigrade. there are also other contentious areas within the balance between mitigation actions versus adaptation. Just to simplify this, mitigation talks to how do we further reduce our greenhouse emissions. And this is really in line with the industrialized and developed countries, for which, again, South Africa is, as an emerging economy, is tending towards that direction. And that's why we're discussing issues about transitioning to renewable energy, transitioning to much more efficient industrial processes, etc., whether it's in energy, in water efficiency, etc. So there are aspects with regards to mitigation that are very crucial and that are very key. But there is a certain level of not too much pressure being placed on the whole issue of adaptation. And adaptation is the consequences that most of our countries face due to increasing climate change, where due to increases like we are seeing within the Southern Africa region, due to drought, we are seeing our livestock not being able to survive the drought situation, food becoming more expensive as it becomes scarce. We are experiencing water shortages, water scarcity within this region, etc. But also the impact it has on the infrastructure, increased flooding. What does that mean in terms of the capacity of the infrastructure we have? The people living in vulnerable situations, in our informal settlements, in our slums, tend to suffer more when such situations emerge. And therefore, there is a cry from the developing countries that more attention should also be given to the adaptation issues on a 50% parity. So those are some of the contentious issues.
So that's our theme for today: climate change, temperatures rising, snow in Egypt. Now, these are some of the things that's happening around the globe. What is your contribution in changing that? We're asking you a question today and would like to get your contribution on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter page. So what do you think should happen after COP21? Do you think that we'll get that binding agreement that we're looking for? Let us know what's on your mind. Meanwhile, Pope Francis will end his three-nation African tour today with a visit to a mosque in the capital of the Central African Republic. The country is split along religious lines, and thousands of people have been killed in 3 years of clashes between Christians and Muslims. On his arrival in Bangui yesterday, the Pope was protected by the heaviest security seen on his trip so far, as thousands of French and UN troops patrolled the city. France, which has around 900 soldiers deployed in the country, warned the Vatican this month that the visit could be risky. But the Pope was determined to go to the CAR, where the majority of the population is Christian. Bangui is the final leg of his first African trip, which has already taken him to Kenya and Uganda. Now, Africa's biggest AIDS conference begins in Harare, Zimbabwe on Sunday. That was last night. The International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, ICASA, will draw close to 4,000 experts and government officials from around the continent. Now, this comes amid warnings that the continent risks losing ground in its fight if the programs are not intensified.
Explicit instructions on how to use condoms safely are boomed over a loudspeaker. Where years ago it would have been unthinkable for Zimbabweans to be seen at such a roadshow, these crowds are a sign of the changing times. Condomize, a project of the United Nations Population Fund, has distributed tens of thousands of condoms in the last 3 days and is breaking myths about the disease.
People are embarrassed and they are shy to talk about condoms, but they think prostitutes are the only people who use condoms.
Zimbabwe officials say 108 million pieces were distributed last year alone, along with 5 million female condoms, the continent's highest uptake.
Zimbabwe is one of the countries where condoms have really been accepted. And in terms of our HIV prevalence, we are one country where we have managed to almost have the infections.
As the country commemorates 30 years since its first HIV diagnosis, it's hosting Africa's largest AIDS conference. Here, the continent is expected to commit to intensifying the fight over the next 5 years.
the trajectory of the epidemic has been broken. It's smaller now than it was 10 years ago. That's a good thing. That's a fine thing. But if people now rest on those laurels and say that's a good enough job, then the epidemic will still be at unsustainable levels for generations and generations to come.
Top of the agenda, discussing goals for universal access to antiretroviral treatment in light of new studies that prove that every HIV-positive person should be on treatment. The ICASA conference will also tackle emerging fault lines.
One of the things that is particularly evident is the extent to which young women, especially those young women just moving into adulthood, the rates of HIV amongst that cohort of young women go up alarmingly from the age of 15, 16, 17, 18.
The prospect of an HIV-free generation is still far off, but the conference hopes that its strategies will keep every infected person alive. Shingai Nyoka, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
People might read more into this than there actually is. ICASA is the organizing group, and it has invited a cross-section of people to attend this particular conference. We've seen or we've heard of reports of confrontations between some of the representatives of the gay community at this particular conference. And very succinctly yesterday, the Zimbabwe's vice president reasserted Zimbabwe's position that no country should force Zimbabwe to accept new rights, rights that it doesn't accept. So, I mean, clearly the government is still stuck in its position that it is not willing to recognize gay rights. Having said that, there were messages in the opening last night which really spoke to the acknowledgement that and the recognition that there needs to be a broad-based intervention that doesn't discriminate whether you're talking about prostitutes or whether you're talking about homosexuality, that really everybody who is infected should be able to access treatment. But really at this stage there is no movement from the government of Zimbabwe in terms of recognizing the gay community.
Strong message there. Condomize, don't compromise. A first there for Zimbabwe. But right now, that's all the news we have for you. Eben is standing by with some more news, reviews and interviews.
Yeah, Albert, thank you very much. We stay with our theme for today, and it's on climate change and renewable energy. This is in our regional slot today. Now, the number of accidents at the R21 and N12 intersection in Kimberley in the Northern Cape, they say will go down this festive season. This after civic rights group AfriForum installed flickering lights at the accident-prone intersection. 86 accidents at this intersection were recorded since April of this year, with 2 fatalities now. This report comes from our newsroom in Kimberley.
In the past decade, 28 people lost their lives on this road. It has been dubbed by some the road of death.
There are many accidents which I've seen personally when I came from the side of DR, neither the side of Postmansberg. So it's too dangerous. That's why I was asking myself, can they do something? So, but it's too dangerous. I don't want to lie.
Definitely dangerous. No, it's dangerous. It's like I say, when you come in from a distance, it looks like the road is on one. They won't say there's a stop sign ahead. Although they are marking to say there is a stop sign, but it's still dangerous. Especially when you are alone at night and then you come along the road and you see it's a bit dark here, there's no light, anything like that. You think, no, yes, let me just carry on.
AfriForum spent 38,000 rand for these solar-powered lights, which they hope will save lives. The project has been on the cards since last year.
AfriForum took the initiative to install aluminium flickering solar lights, which will create much more awareness and make the intersection more visible for road users and create a safe intersection. Our goal is to create a safe intersection where the accidents no longer occur.
Motorists have welcomed this initiative. They say this has improved visibility on the road.
I think it has made a difference. We did see them as we came from Kimberley's side, and I just feel if I can make a suggestion that they could put up more or brighter lights, maybe spotlights, but it definitely does make a difference.
I work for EMS, so we see a lot of accidents on these roads every day, especially on this intersection, this particular one. The visibility now at night is a lot better as well. So I think there are a few things that they could improve on it as well, maybe put a little bit more light in, floodlights up or something like that as well. But for road users in general, I think it's a very good idea.
The newly installed lights are charged by solar energy during the day. They start flickering at night, making road users aware of the intersection. Solplaki Municipality have also welcomed this initiative, and road users are urged to prioritize safety on the road. SABC News, Kimberley.
Now, the National Teachers Union, NATU, has called for an urgent meeting with education authorities in KwaZulu-Natal regarding the freezing of posts. The KwaZulu-Natal Education Department has decided to freeze teaching posts that are allegedly linked to the killing of teachers in the province. Teachers have allegedly been murdered to create vacant posts. Now, the head of the Education Department, Nkosinathi Sishi, says they are freezing all the appointments into posts to allow police to conduct their investigations. NATU's acting president, Alan Thompson, is with us in studio today to talk about this sensitive matter. Very good morning to you, Mr. Thompson. Thanks for joining us once again.
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers. I'm the Deputy President of the...
The Deputy President. You
yes.
see, they say you're acting. Obviously, you're not acting. You are the Deputy President. Thank you for pointing that out. But tell me about this meeting you want with the department with regards to what we can call targeted killings in the teaching profession in not just KwaZulu-Natal, but elsewhere.
Well, we have received concerns from our members and also from the members of public in general, specifically the school governing bodies, where they are raising specific concerns regarding the level of corruption when it comes to the appointments, of which we think those are one of the things that are causing such killing that is taking place in our province. We have been reporting incidents to the Department of Education in KwaZulu-Natal, but they are moving at a very, very slow pace. That is why then we have requested for an urgent meeting, of which my office has confirmed that the MEC will be giving us a date today. The worry that we are having is that KwaZulu-Natal advertised more than 2,000 positions for principals, head of departments and deputy principals. And unfortunately, we have been faced now with high incident of people who are being killed in their positions, those who are acting in positions, those who have been, some of the people they receive sort of messages saying, when are you leaving because you are old in your position. Yeah. And a few days, 3 weeks, a person is gone. He has been shot. So now we want to take up the department because we don't think they are doing enough. Because some of the officials have also been implicated of the Department of Education, and nothing is being done by the department. That is why we are saying we need an urgent meeting so that we can be able to deal with this issue.
Well, what are the suspicions, and who are doing the killings, and how do you then benefit from these then vacant posts? Are these posts being sold, in your opinion?
Well, the National Teachers Union raised a serious concern with the National Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, regarding the selling of post allegations. And hence you will recall that there was an appointment of a ministerial committee, which is headed by Professor Volmik, to look on those issues. We were not happy. We even wrote a letter to the minister to say we are even passing a motion of no confidence to the ministerial trust team because we don't think they are doing a good job. People are waiting for investigation to take place. We have seen in different forms of media where people are ready to give information, but the commission is nowhere to be found, or that task team. So we are of an opinion that there are those who are selling their post. We've raised that issue. We've got people who are ready to come and give confession. But the unfortunate part is that there is no guarantee from the department that they are going to provide necessary protection, especially to those people who are ready to come up with information. 2 weeks ago, in one of the newspapers, I think it was City Press, there was a person who even put his face in a newspaper saying he knows that he's putting his life at risk, but it's just that he cannot take it now going forward. He have been paying more than 1,000 rand every month for the position that he got 2 years ago. Those are the incidents, but unfortunately, we are not seeing people being arrested. We are not seeing any form of a movement from the Department of Education. Hence, we are saying we want now to meet the MEC and be able to find out whether is the department benefiting from what is really happening right now.
It sounds almost like a criminal gang that's running this operation. What are your members on the ground? What are they saying?
Well, our members are the ones that are raising issues. Our members are the ones that are not happy when the officials of the department, let's say there is an interview, normally there is a person that is supposed to go there and sort of be a resource person on behalf of the Department of Education. But unfortunately, some of those people, they end up forcing governing bodies to allocate specific marks even to candidates that are not competent enough to be taken the position. We have seen members of governing bodies coming to us, raising specific concerns about some officials of the department coming to them, trying to talk to them about monies that must be paid and received for them to be able to favor a specific candidate. So we are saying we cannot rule out that the killing that are taking place in the province are not linked. They're linked to the positions that are vacant in the province and also the selling of posts. In other incidents, there are those people who are claiming that the post has been sold. And unfortunately, the candidate that was not anticipated, you find that is the one that is taking a position. 2 days, 3 days later, that candidate is gunned down. So that is why then we are saying we must take this issue serious because the life of our teachers are at risk and the education system is under threat.
Sure, the education system can't afford to lose experienced teachers and high-quality teachers, is that. But what you're talking about also brings another issue into focus, and that is the issue of general safety at schools with regards to even criminal elements coming onto school precincts and so forth. Are you concerned with the general lack of safety in schools?
Yes, in fact, what we have done, we have made an indication again to the Department of Education nationally now, indicating that to see only one security guard responsible for almost 1,500 people, we don't think those people are providing any form of security. No. Hence, we came up with a proposal that there must be new norms and standards for schools. For instance, we say for every 300 people or persons in the school, there must be one security guard, which means if a school has almost 1,000 learners and teachers, then we know for sure that we'll have a minimum of at least 3. We have made a request that there must be a collaboration between the South African Police Services together with the Department of Education, just to make sure that they subdivide the schools, they allocate police stations, sub-police stations, they do the patrols at 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We have made a call for the metal detectors also to be allocated in each and every school so that we know that people who are coming in and out of the school are not carrying dangerous weapons that are sort of threatening people's life. We have seen a teacher that was gunned down in front of the full view of all other learners and school community. That is why then we are saying the issue of safety, it is a serious issue and there is nothing enough that has been done to address it.
Mr. Thompson, thank you very much for joining us today. We've run out of time. It's a very sensitive topic. Let's hope that some alignment can be found because we cannot afford to have our teachers killed for something as menial as a vacant position that gets solved. Thank you for joining us. That is the Deputy President of the National Teachers Union. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now we move down to the Eastern Cape, where the Port Elizabeth Opera House has been given a 30 million rand revamp, making it a state-of-the-art theatre to promote arts and culture. Established in 1892, it is one of the oldest in the country and told stories of pain during the apartheid era. The reopening of the Opera House has attracted hundreds of theatre patrons, as well as the return of the internationally acclaimed production Sizwe Banzi is Dead.
The Opera House is the home of performing arts since 1892. It was declared a national monument in 1980. The younger generation of artists will now be given an opportunity to showcase their talent here. Their revamped project includes the band theatre with modern finishes, new chandeliers and suspended staircase.
The Opera House is going to be the platform for young people to launch their careers from the Eastern Cape. On the 3rd of December, we are going to have every dancers from across the province, because we want the Opera House to be that which is a springboard for young people from the Eastern Cape in dance, in drama, and in live music performance.
Dr. John Kani, who hails from New Brighton Townships, learned his craft here in this building. Today, he and two of his colleagues, Winston Chona and Ethel Fugard, have now reintroduced their internationally renowned play, Sizwe Banzi is Dead, into this revamped theatre. The production tells stories of New Brighton since 1972 through visual memory.
Port Elizabeth should come and say, this is where we present and showcase our talent and celebrate our culture and work for social cohesion. This is where all our people will assemble with a different diversity and cultures to be together. I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
This sustained glass window of the three living legends is an honor of the contribution they have made in the arts industry over decades.
And I see these glass-stained images of Athol in a beautiful blue dinner jacket, he hasn't got it. Winston in a grey jacket, he never owned it. Me, I've got this beautiful centerpiece like I'm going to an evening gown. I don't have that jacket. But the faces, he captured each one of us at the best moment and mood. And I said to my wife, we've been immortalized. My children, my grandchildren, and my great-great-grandchildren one day will walk into this theater and ask, who are those faces? And someone would say, that's my great-grand-grandfather.
Kani says the platform has been created and that it's up to the younger generation of performing arts to uplift the standards of the sector in South Africa. Zolani Moya, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Well, that wraps our regional roundup this morning. After a short break, Kendall Machamate will be talking to soccer pundit and Orlando Pirates supporter extraordinaire, David Kakana. Don't go away.
Media Monitor, your weekly media news review program.
It was squashed some few months back, but obviously this is something that is going to hang around Pravin until it is actually dealt with. If he didn't know, then he wasn't doing his job.
In it, she described how the man's hair was frozen, although the man has no hair.
Is anybody volunteering to go to jail for him? That is not how the law works.
This particular matter makes us really look like a serious banana republic.
Unpacking headlines and giving analysis on topical issues. Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Good morning. Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Our top story for this bulletin is Orlando Pirates' hopes of a second continental crown in 20 years were dashed by Etoile du Sahel following a 1-0 defeat in the CAF Confederation Cup final second leg. A first-half goal bundled over by Etoile captain Ahmad Jamal was enough to give the Tunisian side a 2-1 aggregate win over the Buccaneers in Sousse.
The home side enjoyed territorial advantage in the first quarter of the match, and Pirates keeper Felipe Obono was called into action twice in the opening stages. Midway in the first half, the home side lost their leading goal scorer Baghdad Boneja due to an injury. 4 minutes later, Ahmad Jamal The man who broke Pirates' hearts with a late goal last week put his side in the lead. The Tunisian defender again benefited from another defensive mistake by the South Africans.
Came to South Africa, found a late equaliser.
Pirates had a frustrating first half, and their strikers often mistimed their runs and squandered some goal-scoring opportunities. With nothing to lose, Pirates started the second half well. They launched waves of attacks and had the Tunisians under pressure. Thabo Rakgale had a golden opportunity to equalize, but his first touch let him down.
Rakgale outside, Balbouli's read it beautifully.
Late in the game, Du Sahel goalkeeper and Tunisian international Ayman Matlodi produced two brilliant saves to deny Tamsa Ngakabuza and Swiso Myeni. This was the first time in the campaign that Pirates had failed to score. It was a brave performance by the men in black, but in the end, it was not enough. Thabo Daniels, SABC News.
And so it is that Orlando Pirates made all the hard yards getting to the final of the CAF Confederations Cup. They beat continental giants Egyptian club Al Ahly twice in the semi-final and were poised to repeat the heroics of 1995 when they won the Champions League for the Lone Star on their jersey. It was not to be, as they first conceded an equalizing goal in Orlando and then lost 1-0 away in Tunisia. With me is SABC soccer analyst David Kekana, and also, as Evan said, Pirates fan extraordinaire.
I don't know where he gets it from, because my beautiful birds people will probably murder him for what he's saying.
All right, no, so you're fixing it right up front. Thanks for coming through. A lot's being said of Pirates and their bravery getting to this point in general, as also in the match in particular.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you want to find things that really resonate home with what happened in '95 to what happened now, you will always find nice things to say as journalists. I mean, we'll go back to '95 and see that during that time, Orlando Pirates lifted the trophy with the guy wearing jersey number 4, and he was called Majens, which was Majens Mutale. And now another number 4 defender, which is Happy Jele, is called Majens also. So we thought that that's a good story. And 95 and 2015, there's another 5 at the end that really brings things together, and it's 20 years of celebrating what Pirates did in 1995. So there were a lot of elements that wanted a climate that sees Orlando Pirates coming triumphantly and bringing the trophy back home, but it was not about to be.
Now, very well put there. And let's talk about same. In the very first leg of that final, it was their captain, the Etoile captain, Ahmad Jamal, who got that goal in the 94th minute. And then the same guy who was actually maybe applied the finishing touches for something that was already going in.
Yeah, he's done well for Etoile, and he leads from the front. But again, I mean, when you look at the goals conceded, specifically that one that was the equalizer at Orlando Stadium, you get sick in the stomach because it's a set piece. And you think that things like set piece, and specifically playing against a team of Etoile with some big players, organization would be better. And I thought on the day that Palace organization, in a crucial moment, because it was the 84th minute, 4 minutes to go, you know, you're playing at home, you're leading, you probably close shop and make sure that you don't concede, and you know you're going away, and you're going to put pressure on them, and you've got the cushion of a goal. So to concede that late at Orlando Stadium was for me the big problem. And you could see that these guys, Etoile Du Sahel, they are champions in terms of killing the game. On numerous occasions, they'll take an extra minute from doing something. They fall on the ground. They make sure that time flies by very quickly, and that you don't get opportunities as well on goal. And I think Orlando Pirates on the day, the players will pat themselves on the back and say, we tried. But again, it is those little things that we don't really look at that really differentiates between being a team that has got BMT that can win and a team that will always find themselves as bridesmaids. I mean, Pirates did this in 2013 as well, losing to another Red Devils in Al Ahly. So it's becoming a bit of a habit to get to the final but not to win. And that, I think, is something that Orlando Pirates have got to sort out, because they are, of course, one of the best teams on the continent. And, you know, the African continent today is talking about them, but they could have done better than they did. And
so they should. They made it to the final of the CAF Confederations Cup. They've won the African or the Champions League before. You mentioned there were some little things that actually get in the way of Pirates showing that BMT. What kind of things are you talking about that you saw in this match that you say, you know what, that's maybe BMT missing there?
A lot of good teams, what they do is that when they get small opportunities, or should I say little opportunities as far as the game, the little that they get, they make use of them. I mean, I think on numerous occasions, or even twice, Rahane got into good space, into good opportunities. The first one was when Kabuza put him through in the first half, and he lashed at his shot across goal, which I thought he should have done better. The second one, he's controlling the box. I mean, you would have thought that with the ball coming that way, he would hit it at the same time, volley into the top corner. That's what you want to see. In a hostile environment, silencing the crowd and seeing your names in light. And then he tried to control it, and then the keeper came out and took it. And those little opportunities, when you get them, you don't get a second chance. You should finish them. And those that defines whether a team is meant to win a trophy of this magnitude or not. And a lot of Pirates failed on those occasions. And I think even again, you had the defender, Sangweni, too. In the box, the ball landed on his feet. It was the wrong guy. He's a defender. But yet again, you'd have thought that he'd poked it, because he's done that even for Bafana. You remember the goal he scored for Bafana against Morocco at Soccer City. So you think that those opportunities that came the Pirates' way, they should have used them, but they didn't.
Would you say there was too much trust placed in their away record? Because everybody's been talking about how well Pirates has done away in this particular campaign. And once that equalizer was scored at Orlando Stadium, the trust was, okay, cool, you know, we've done it before, we'll do it again in this final.
The issue is that they had scored in all their away games leading to this match. So there was always confidence that Pirates will score at least a goal. And even when the game continued in that vein where they were only needing one goal to make it 2-2 and go into the penalties, you always thought that something will change, something will give, they'll get something. But they failed on that accord, because when you look at a great side like Etoile Sahel, don't take anything away from them. The one thing that they've done is that at home, they're very clinical and they win games. That's why they had not lost a match in 20 games since they had lost to Marseille in a friendly. So it tells you about the quality of the team, and it tells you about what they managed to do at home. They lose away from home in the Tunisian league, but they've made their stadium in Sousse into a fortress, and it's very difficult to beat them there.
It clearly was, and also they've had 13 clean sheets out of 21 games. Can you tell us, like in closing, what now for Coach Eric Tinkler? Because he's under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, Eric has got to come back and refocus. Orlando Pirates are not doing well as far as the league is concerned. It's important that now they start to pick up games. There's still the Telkom knockout for Orlando Pirates to play. There's still the Nedbank Cup, which of course makes sure that they go back into the African continent to go and play again in the Confederations Cup. So there's still a lot to play for as far as the South African domestic affairs are concerned for Orlando Pirates. And I think that the fans want to see a change now, because now there's always been an issue of the fact that they're traveling, coming back, and the logistics of trying to mix the two and making sure that the players stay fresh during that time, because the traveling does affect the players a lot. Now it's only one trophy, one thing to focus on, which is the PSL. And I hope that they can start doing well and make sure that their fans have got something to cheer by the end of the season.
I'm sure we all hope that. In fact, all of their fans and all South African soccer fans hope that they do well, since they've done so well representing the country out on the continent. Thank you so much, Mr. Kekana.
My pleasure.
All right, that was David Kekana, soccer guru, analyst extraordinaire. I'll take away the Pirates fan extraordinaire part. I'll take that out. And thanks very much for coming through to chat to us. Now, in other sports news, 5-time National Basketball Association champion Kobe Bryant announced his retirement. Bryant was experiencing the worst season of his illustrious 20-year career with Los Angeles Lakers, posted a poem on the Players Tribune website saying he's ready to let go.
The 37-year-old guard announced that he will retire at the end of the 2015-2016 season. Bryant, who is third on the NBA's all-time scoring list, has been plagued by injuries in recent seasons. He has a career-worst 31.5 shooting percentage through his first 12 games of the current campaign.
A decision like this, you can't make that decision based on, outside circumstances. It has to be an internal decision, and finally, I just had to just accept the fact that I don't want to do this anymore. You know, and I'm okay with that. And you know, once I accepted that, then it became time to just let everybody know. I mean, why not? I mean, it's just, you know, it takes a load off my shoulders and everybody else's, and I think it's just the right thing to do.
In a poem titled Dear Basketball, Brian talked about shooting imaginary game-winning shots in the NBA as a young boy and falling in love with the game.
You know, I honestly feel good about it. I really do. I mean, I really feel at peace with it, and you know, excited for what's to come, honestly.
The surefire first ballot Hall of Famer's decision to retire was not totally unexpected, as he was already considering it. Themba Shiba, SABC News.
A lot of basketball fans will be very sad to see him go. We take a short break. We'll have a look at the weather, actually, and then we'll take a break. And I know Eben and Elvis are standing by to give us more. Stay tuned.
Well, almost time for us to say goodbye, to wrap up this morning's newsroom program. Of course, from myself, Elvis and Kendall. Before we go, though, we ask you that question. Unfortunately, we don't have the traction on this question today. Maybe we're not interested in saving the world.
You know, you must save the world. 2 degrees, that's all we ask for, Eben. Yeah. So don't, you know, use things that you shouldn't use. Yeah. Reduce. Swane has done that. I mean, they're using gas buses instead of diesel. So what are you doing?
No, we've got a lot of pictures, of course, coming out of Paris. Yeah, we've got David Fiore talking about this morning in Paris, first day of COP21 sunrise. It's good, of course. The world leaders, Kendall, 150 world leaders are there to hopefully iron out a deal so that we can all understand what we need to do and how we can live with less. Prince Charles is even there.
Yeah, with that said, earlier on we had a chat about it. You mentioned that it's like COP21, as in 21 years of COP. And what do we have so far? Very interesting, that.
Look at this picture, hey? Stop climate change. Is this how you want to hand over the wheel to your children?
Yeah.
This is what it's going to look like.
Obviously, that's at the heart of it, you know. At the heart of it is, it's very easy to be selfish in your own life because, you know that your time is short. But the hour is now. Now is the time for us to take responsibility and make sure that we hand over a world to our children and our children's children that will be livable, that our coastal cities won't be flooded, that Africa's not ravaged by hunger and drought. Let's hope that COP21 makes a dent, makes a mark.
And maybe we can make the change. Each of us in this world can make a change. Make your change today. That's what we got to leave. From myself, Elvis Presley.
Yevini Ansu.
Kendall Makamate. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.
Bye-bye.
The son of Africa, Trevor Noah, is leaving America in stitches.
I never dreamed that I would one day have, well, 2 things really. An indoor toilet and a job as host of The Daily Show.
We are the first to bring you the latest films around the globe.
Dear white people, the minimum requirement of black friends needed to not seem racist has just been raised to 2.
Cobhams Esako is a gifted blind musician, a master of soothing notes from the piano.
And I love to sit behind the piano. You know, that also helps me find inspiration.
Join Refulo Mulwa every Friday for that 1-hour weekly dose of art and entertainment news at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Vera Ephraim defied family and traditions to follow her dream.
Decided that I'm going to prove to them that they were wrong.
The first breakthrough came in when she was studying and touring in Europe.
That was my first breakthrough.
Generations was her first television debut in South Africa.
It was my first gig. I was very excited. I was very happy. I said, yeah, this is confirmation I'm at the right place.
After pain, rejection, and suffering, her dream became a reality.
I followed my path, and I'm happy and grateful and blessed.
Join your host, Puleng Mulabati, on Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
a very rare sight. These women make up a minority of female builders in the construction industry. Their mission to provide homes for the residents of Sokhulumi village outside Bonko Strait.
It's one of the houses that we built. As you can still see, we're still going to be putting ceilings. And it's one of those houses that I was explaining how they were built out of the donations, that we're getting. It's a 2-bed house. It's got a bathroom. But unfortunately, we could not fit in the bathroom fittings because there is no bulk services around this area. So that we could not be able to do. But at least Anna and the siblings are now living comfortably in a nice, warm house.
But as dreams require commitment and hard work, Gelegele had to start somewhere.
Unfortunately, I could not further my studies. Having passed TOTS exemption, I could not further my studies because my dad said he didn't have money. The initial course that I wanted to do, I wanted to become a medical doctor. So unfortunately, I could not go to school due to that. So I had to stay at home, because my mom refused for me to go and look for a job because the alternative was to say, Ma, look, we need money here, we need to buy bread, because that's the time when as a girl you feel mostly useless when you can't even assist your mother and your siblings. So then I studied at Bara. I did a diploma in nursing, qualified after 4 years in midwifery, psychiatry, community and general nursing.
After she left a job as a professional nurse, she worked for the South African Airwaves as a flight attendant.
There was a time for that transformation in the 1995, 1996. So I applied for work at the South African Airways because one of the things that I had at the back of my mind, this secret mission, was to travel the world, because I'd never been on an aeroplane, but I knew that someday I must be on an aeroplane going somewhere. I didn't know where. So I decided I'm going to travel the world. And when this opportunity came and it presented itself, I said, voila, So I went and I traveled the world for 2 years as a flight attendant. And within SAA, I grew through the ranks. By the time I left, it was in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. I was already in the management of on the operational side of things. That's when I decided, now I need to look at starting a business.
She joined forces with the South African Women in Construction, where she was introduced to other women who owned small businesses in the construction industry.
You're looking at where the government is going. There's a need for SMMEs to be developed. There's a need for women to partake in the economic development of the country. And at that time, you'd find that you have a few women that were there, but they were not necessarily making it. And I thought to myself, maybe it's time for me to leave the corporate world, but with the skills that I've learned from the corporate world, I can be able to apply in the business side of things, and then we can be able to grow from there.
Once the ladies came together, it was a match made in heaven. Their mission was to use their skills to change the lives of others for the better by providing them with homes.
When the deputy minister came here to hand over those 8 houses, then she made the proclamation that she wants to see this place being developed, and that was the birth of the project that we are currently doing, which is about 510 houses and 510 toilets that we are busy building right now. We started off here with about 35 women that are coming from Sawick. Now, when the project became a commercial project, then we decided to group them into cooperatives. Because, look, the truth is it's very difficult for women to move up your CIDB grading as individuals. Most of them that you are seeing here are at CIDB grade 1. They are running their own companies. So it's going to take forever if government is going to give each and every woman a project on her own.
Nothing seemed impossible with their determination. Once they received the building material, the ladies put on their overalls and started building.
This job is the most fulfilling job that I've ever done. Maybe because, firstly, I am a go-getter and I thrive in challenge. So having an opportunity in an industry that was previously not allowed for women was an opportunity for me to settle a certain score. So most of us here, we've attended courses, yes. We've done project management, some have done bricklaying, some have done foam work in terms of how do you deal with concrete, some have done painting, tiling, paving, some have done plumbing, electrical. So the trades are also there because it's also our mandate as SAWIC to make sure that we organize such skills development for the women.